Please feel free to adjust the playback speed to 1.25 or 1.5 depending on your preference. Jin-Woo lapped the outer perimeter of the hospital once and arrived back in front of his room. He was currently bent over and panting out heavily. His heart felt like it might explode at any second, but he couldn't give up yet. I worked so crazy hard until now, so no way I would. He somehow managed to open the door and took a step forward. When he did that, total distance ran 10 kilometers. You've completed running 10 kilometers. It was finally over. Jin-Woo fell down to his knees. His breath reeked of something sweet and bitter. His face and back were soaked in sweat. Pant, pant. As Jin-Woo tried to regulate his heavy, rough breathing while thick sweat drops continuously dripped down, a familiar message popped up in front of his eyes. You've completed daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Completion rewards have arrived. Would you like to confirm? Y/N. Jin-Woo momentarily thought about forgetting about everything and simply laying down in defeat, but quickly changed his mind. At least for now, he wanted to confirm what these reward things could actually be with his own eyes first. Confirm. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. 3 additional stat points. Reward 3. 1 random box. Would you like to collect them all? Why are there so many of them? That was the first thought to enter his dazed mind after he took a gander at the contents of his rewards. But when he thought about it a little deeper, one of those rewards seemed rather useful right now, and there was also one that made him curious about what it could actually mean. For now, he urgently needed the first reward available. He was on the brink of collapsing here. Since there really was a penalty for failure, the odds of completion rewards being real were pretty D*M high as well. Well, trying wouldn't hurt anyways, right? Seriously, this thing wouldn't throw him back into the penalty zone again after it said it'd give him the rewards, now would it? As soon as he muttered that out, a gentle blue aura enveloped him. Isn't this sensation? Right away, he recalled Lee Ju-hyu's face. When he was getting healed by her, he felt the sensation similar to what he was feeling right now. If he were to put this feeling into words, then it'd be like a refreshing blast of air entering his lungs before leaving again, something like that. He felt the blue aura slowly dissipating. For some reason, he kind of felt a bit rueful. Jin-Woo got up from the floor and lightly jumped up and down on the spot and stretched his body this way and that. How can this be? His heart that felt like it might explode was beating calmly now, and his rough breathing had stabilized as well. He didn't even feel a speck of fatigue. His body that was on the brink of collapsing felt refreshed as if he just got up from a night of good rest. The effect, in other words, was top-notch. Isn't this really amazing? Jin-Woo's eyes now resembled circles. He wasn't sure whether this was some kind of magic or not, but this phenomenon could change him in the most astonishing way, without a doubt. In that case, would those stat points be the same? When Jin-Woo shifted his gaze around, he spotted a small box resting on top of the bed as well as his own stat window floating in the air. I guess that thing over there is the random box. The important thing was his stat window, though. This window displayed simple information about himself. He figured that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to leave this hospital right about now. And there was something he wanted to confirm as well. Now, where did I put it? Jin-Woo rummaged around his pockets and brought something out. It was a key gleaming in a golden hue. It featured such a simple design that it could be passed off as an accessory at a casual glance. Jin-Woo observed the key for a long time before he secured it back inside his pocket. While he was in the middle of being discharged, a certain young female nurse hurriedly ran to where he was. Pant. Mr. Sung Jin-Woo, are you getting ready to be discharged today? Pardon? Yes, I am. She was the nurse in charge of his care, Choya. Yura formed a rueful expression when she heard his affirmation. Jin-Woo didn't know why, so he could only stand there looking rather confused. He wondered if he had made a mistake somewhere, but he couldn't think of anything. Yura hesitated slightly before pulling out a small memo pad. Will be okay if you give me your contact numbers? My contact numbers? Only if you're okay with it. Could there be some test results that needed to be sent at a later date or something? Jin-Woo didn't think too much about it and took the memo pad. However, all he got from her was just that, a memo pad and nothing else. When Jin-Woo stared at her, her face reddened. What's the matter? About a pen. Please wait. She must forgotten in her rush to get here. Yura became flustered and hurriedly turned around. Jin-Woo got up to leave. His business was done here. He had already completed the daily quest that never failed to show up every day, and the application for the new phone at the association also ended faster than he expected. Jin-Woo exited from the association building and pulled the golden key out again. Is it now time to check this little guy out, then? The information on the key floated up in green letters. Item, dungeon key. A key that transfers you to an instant dungeon. Can be used at the third exit of the Hapjeong subway station. He found this key inside one of the random boxes he got as the daily quest rewards. At first, he wondered why a key would come out from there, but once he saw the rarity category, he immediately realized that this was no ordinary item. This was one of the reasons prompting him to get discharged from the hospital as well. An entrance key to the instant dungeon. Whether it was called instant or not, a dungeon was a dungeon. If it was about dungeons, then he had plenty of painful memories regarding those. This one time, he participated in a raid ranked E and ended up getting wounded so badly that he had to stay in the hospital for over a week. Back then, he was able to survive because of the comrades that went with him, but if he used this key to enter a dungeon, then it meant that he had to enter it all alone. He deliberated for a long time before making up his mind. I'm sure there will be no problems as long as I just take a quick peek inside. If things looked bad, all he had to do was run away, after all. Had been running 10 kilometers every day for a while now, so he was pretty confident of running away, actually. And it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Is there a wall blocking me? He pounded on the invisible wall and shouted at the outside, but no one replied back. People continued to carry on with their own lives, that was all. Sometimes, someone approached the Hapjeong station, but they simply vanished as soon as coming in contact with this invisible wall. It was quite likely that the place he was in and the outside world were two separate dimensions. Jin-Woo tried his hardest to force his way out of this place, which prompted a new alert message to pop up. Tearing. You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find the return crystal. It was the same message as before. The key in his possession disappeared as soon as he set foot inside the third exit of the subway station, and, by the time Jin-Woo realized things had gone rather awry and hurriedly turned around to leave, it was already too late. He was thinking of finding a hidden gate or some kind of a doorway within the third exit that would transport him to a dungeon, but his expectation was completely off the mark. And quite different from the regular dungeons, he couldn't even leave as he pleased, too. It's different from other dungeons. Jin-Woo spat out a long groan and looked behind him. What he could see now was the interior of the subway station that had transformed into a jungle. Walls were thick with twisting vines, and rancid odor akin to rotting corpses assaulted his senses. Hell, he even heard the cries of what sounded like wild beasts from afar every now and then, too. It wasn't that there was a hidden entrance somewhere near the entrance of the Hapjeong station, but the entire station had become a dungeon, instead. Jin-Woo pulled the steel longsword out from his inventory. Item, Kim Sang-sik steel longsword. TAC +10. His back was blocked off, and he had no method of contacting outside, so the only option left was to go forward. Jin-Woo nervously swallowed his saliva and slowly descended the steps. He held his breath and surveyed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything particular. However, it was truly forbidden to underestimate the dangers in a dungeon. Among the low-ranked monsters, there were quite a few that knew how to mask and hide their presence very well. No, maybe because they were so low-ranked that they had no choice but to hide and wait to ambush their prey. Past the toilets, he entered deeper and encountered the underground shopping center. Shops were worn down and in complete disarray, looking more like a ruin than anything else. Seeing the humanless ruined shells of the shops dimly illuminated by the flickering overhead lamps, something felt rather ominously creepy and sinister. Flicker, flicker. A few of the lamps continued to flicker as if their life was nearing the end. Jin-Woo carefully stepped on the overgrown weeds jutting out from between the cracked floor tiles and continued on forward, but he picked up on a general aura of unease and scanned his surroundings. Everything seemed so quiet and still, but he did sense a gaze of something. And then there was this smell too. A seriously rotten odor of an animal carcass with flies buzzing around was coming from somewhere. For Jin-Woo, who had frequently entered dungeons, this was a rather familiar smell. This smell. An animal-type monster. However, he still couldn't find its whereabouts at all. Just like how a predator would stalk its prey. Oh, so you want to remain hidden and wait for your chance? Is that it? In that case, he should give it one. Jin-Woo deliberately turned around and presented his back. And very slowly, retread the path he had taken until now. An animal would try pounce on the prey as soon as its back was shown. An animal-type monster would be no different. And so, it happened when he took his third step. The shop window of a clothing store behind him shattered into pieces and something jumped out. And this something, as soon as it landed on the ground, leapt towards Jin-Woo's exposed neck in one go. Jin-Woo had been getting ready for a sneak attack like this one, so almost immediately he swung the sword in the direction of the sound. It was a perfectly executed instinctive counter. Swish! The sharp edge of the blade sliced open the creature's maw. The monster spat out a pained cry as it flew away from Jin-Woo and crashed on the ground, rolling around in a heap. SFX for a dog-type whimpering, repeated. It was a huge wolf with a reddish coat of fur. The wolf with its maw sliced away wiggled around and threw a seizure-like fit as if it was under a great deal of pain. When he took a closer look, its name also appeared on top of its head, just like the centipedes from the penalty zone. Iron-fanged Leakin. However, unlike before, its name was in white letters, not red. There is no time to waste here. This was the perfect opportunity while the monster could not move from its wound. Jin-Woo threw his body forward. He ran hard and fast, and chopped down with his sword, separating the creature's head from its body. Rar! Leakin spat out the final roar and stopped breathing afterwards. You've killed an iron-fanged Leakin. However, the joy of victory was temporary. Two more Lycans jumped out from their hiding place from behind the shop's darkness. It was in a pack? Jin-Woo's eyes grew wider. They bared their big fangs and closed the distance in an instant. Jin-Woo's expression crumpled dismally. He must have chopped down too hard from all the excitement, because the sword was lodged on the ground too deep and it stubbornly refused to come out. It stuck somewhere. It was at this moment that one of the Lycans aimed for his face and leapt up. Jin-Woo ducked low. The Leakin flew over his head and landed face first on the ground after failing to stop in time. Stab! When its fangs stabbed into the stone floor, cracks instantly formed on the hard surface. I guess it's not called iron-fanged for nothing. Of course, he didn't have the leeway to stay there and admire this scene. One more monster was still running towards his front at the moment, too. His sword showed no signs of coming free from its earthly prison for the time being. Screw this. Jin-Woo had no choice but to give up on the sword for now and threw a hard punch at the Leakin closing in. Whoosh! Accompanied by a bone-chilling sound of wind parting ways, his fist flew straight forward. Pow! It took just one hit and the head of the Leakin simply exploded. The corpse of the now headless Leakin slammed into the ceiling above and then, powerlessly fell down to the ground. Jin-Woo's eyes opened up very wide and he stared dumbfoundedly at his own fist. What an unexpected destructive power that was. The sole surviving Leakin, the one that flew over Jin-Woo's head just now, lowered its tail after seeing this scene and began taking faltering steps backwards. Was this the result from him raising his strength stat? The utterly stunned Sung Jin-Woo couldn't close his slack jaw as the headless Lycan's legs shook like a leaf, before its movement stopped for good. That was when he heard the familiar mechanical beep going off again. Tearing. You've killed an iron-fanged Leakin. Level up. My level rose up? To make sure that he didn't mishear that, Jin-Woo hurriedly accessed his status window. His level really did go up. And when a level went up, a single point was added to all of his stats. As it turned out, it wasn't only the quest rewards that could impact the values of his stats. It was also possible to improve his stats through leveling up, too. To think, I can actually level up. He only carried a vague expectation, but it actually became reality. His heart began to beat faster and faster. On top of that, I get more additional points from leveling up. The stat points he got from the quest rewards were 3. Meanwhile, he got 5 from leveling up once. Although he didn't like the fact that he couldn't freely distribute those points the way he liked to, but still, his growth through leveling up was much greater. Also, there was the thing about quests only being available once per day, but there was a good chance that leveling up wouldn't suffer from such restrictions. I only killed 2, but my level rose up. This was the same as in video games. When his level was low, he could raise it up by a lot during a short space of time. And currently, Jin-Woo was only a level 2. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was right at the bottom of the pile. However, he was not what one would call a normal low-level player either. His strength stat already exceeded 30. If the strength stat rose up by 1 point every time one leveled up, then the stat value of Jin-Woo's strength was equivalent to level 20 or higher. What if a user possessing level 20's worth of strength stat hunted in the level 1 beginner's hunting area? In other words, explosive leveling up. As if to prove his guess, the destructive might behind that punch easily exceeded his own expectations. The strength stat might have been multiplied by just over 3 times, but the difference in actual, physical strength was well beyond that. Jin-Woo's original strength value was 10. There was the difference of 3 times the value between the strength stat of 10 and 30, but the difference between the actual forces produced was well beyond that. Could it be? What if, as the stat's value rose up, the weight was also added as well? If that was the case, then such a destructive power output could easily be explained away. Besides that, his movement speed had increased as well. If it was in the past, there was no way he'd be able to lightly evade the all-out attack of an animal, nor could his punch move fast enough to produce the sound of the air splitting apart. Right, the physical strength in my muscles has increased, so obviously my speed would have increased along the way too. Simply by raising his strength stat higher, both his power and speed had gone up. The battle against the lichens proved this. So, what would happen if he increased his agility instead? His curiosity was at its peak, but he didn't have any method to find out at the moment. If he wanted to satisfy his burning curiosity, then he simply had to increase his stats ASAP. Even still, he couldn't help but think that investing points he got as quest rewards in the agility stat kinda felt a bit wasteful. If he shored up his strength stat, both his power and speed would go up anyway, so what was the point of investing in the agility stat? Since his thoughts were as such, there was only one way to go forward here. I gotta level up lots of times, really fast. Indeed, he'd raised the agility stat through leveling up. Every little cent saved would eventually net him a buck later down the line. If he increased the values 1 point at a time, he'd feel the difference sooner or later. Jin-Woo pried loose the sword off the ground. In that case, shall I get started for real, then? There was one more monster he needed to kill, after all. By the way, where did it disappear to? The lichen that was definitely somewhere nearby had gone with the wind before he had noticed it. Jin-Woo hurriedly scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find a single trace of the creature. Quite likely, it had turned tail and ran away while he was immersed in the status windows. Well, he should have known something was up when it lowered its tail and cautiously studied his mood. TSK. Jin-Woo smacked his lips, realizing that a bundle of experience points had just escaped from his grasp. Hang on, do these things give away things like magic crystals, too? The sudden thought popping up in his head stopped him in his tracks. Monsters appearing within the gates all possessed one, or sometimes, several, magic crystals in them. If one got lucky, a rune stone might drop, too. Magic crystals could be used for a variety of purposes, and they alone exchanged hands for princely sums. No need to even mention the rune stones, which could be used by hunters to learn brand new skills. It was not an exaggeration to say that the reasons why hunters participated in raids was not just because of the promised payment from the related organizations, but also these magic crystals as well. Jin-Woo was also a hunter. He was successful in killing these monsters, so not being rewarded for his work kind of felt a bit like he was wrong somehow. Feeling a little rueful, he sliced open the lichen's stomach, but it turned out to be a waste of time. It seemed that these creatures were fundamentally different from the regular monsters. The thing was, he had entered quite a few different dungeons in his career so far, but he had never seen these wolf-like monsters before. Jin-Woo dusted his hands and was about to stand back up, but then he spotted something glittering within the dead liken's mouth. So, he opened the creature's maws. One of the liken's fangs was emitting a beam of light. When Jin-Woo reached out, a new message popped up before him. Sure thing. Item: the canine of a lichen. Rarity: none. Type: miscellaneous. A large and sharp canine of a lichen. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Jin-Woo got flustered a bit while staring at the canine tooth. There was a store too. Where would you find a system less friendly than the one he was saddled with? To think, it was designed in such a way that the end user had to personally experience it with his own body before learning about any of its functions. Hell, he wasn't given much of an explanation during the penalty quest and he almost died as a result back then. Jin-Woo gnashed his teeth and tried to summon this store thing. He couldn't help but feel his anticipation build up, wondering if a shop with a signboard declaring store and manned by an NPC merchant, kinda like from video games, might really appear before him. However, what appeared instead was a bunch of green letters floating in the air like hologram projections, just like when he accessed his mailbox. And there were only 2 words there too. Buy and sell. What a simple-tastic store this was. Jin-Woo selected buy. He didn't have a single cent in his pockets, but he was still curious about the stuff available within the store. Unfortunately for him, the store turned out to be one cold customer. Your level is too low to access the buy function. He was already familiar with the cold shoulder treatment from the places that required him to pay up, so this was fine. Jin-Woo didn't think too much about it and shifted his gaze away to sell. Will you sell item: the canine of a lichen? Yup. With the clinging sounds of coins, his inventory appeared next. Right at the bottom of the display, in the column saying gold, he could see the number 20 appearing there. That space had been empty yesterday. 20 gold. He couldn't really use that money in real life, and he couldn't even use the store properly yet, so he had no idea just how much this 20 gold was actually worth. A creature from the Ranky dungeon wouldn't have given me any decent loot, to begin with. Even if there was a difference between the dungeons found beyond the gates and this so-called instant dungeon, it would be the same difference at the end of the day. Still, Jin-Woo wanted to make sure, so he was about to collect the canine from the other dead lichen, but he ended up doing a facepalm instead. I blew away its entire head, didn't I? Jin-Woo felt bitter as he turned around to go somewhere else. 20 gold and its unknown worth were calling back to him, but he couldn't waste time searching for a single canine that could have flown to pretty much anywhere under this dim lighting. However, as soon as he turned around, the feelings of bitterness dissipated in an instant. Growl. Well now, the lichen he thought had ran away actually came back with a bunch of its friends. A wonderfully bright smile bloomed on Jin-Woo's face. Even at a casual glance, there must be over 20 of them here. Hang on a minute, was that the right word to use in this sort of situation? Whatever. It was definitely a word to express one's joy, anyway. Jin-Woo tightly grasped the sword and spoke up. With the exception of your canines, I'm gonna massacre all of you. When the chilling glare of a man who was obsessed about making money landed on the lichens, they became intimidated and shuddered slightly. It was at this point that Jin-Woo pounced on them without mercy. Level up. As he expected, his levels rose up quite quickly. Simply from searching every nook and cranny of the first floor and killing all the lichens he could find, Jin-Woo's level shot right up to 7. He had jumped up 5 flights of stairs, in other words. When he caught up and killed the very last monster running desperately away from him, a strange message popped up into his view. You have acquired the title, Slaughterer of Wolves. A title? Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. When he opened his status window to take a look, the title column indeed had been updated. A bonus boost to his stats when fighting against animal-type monsters. Although the effect was a bit restricted, still, having his stats increase by 40%, now that didn't sound too bad at all. There are plenty of animal-type monsters out there, So would this apply to them as well? If that was the case, then he'd be able to easily kill monsters when participating in the future raids. However, he still earned big time even when disregarding his new title. 34 wolf canines, 2 rusted daggers, a set of traveler's clothes, and 1 return crystal. While killing these wolves, he learned that he could sometimes find loot from their bellies. Of course, none of them was all that useful. The rusted daggers possessed lower attack power bonus compared to the sword he'd been using until now, and the traveler's clothes were not something he could actually wear, but just some random Japtum, vendor trash, essentially, that he could hawk off to the store. When he sold them all off, he earned just over 1,000 gold. Current gold, 1,060. Even then, I can't really celebrate, can I? Well, no matter how much he hoarded this gold thing, he couldn't use them anyways. At least not for now. The only thing remaining, besides the gold, was the return crystal. When he was trying desperately to escape from the dungeon back then, the message said he'd need a return crystal if he wanted to leave. And now, if he wanted to, he could escape at any time. He found himself on a crossroads. In front, the stairs leading down to the second floor. And in his hand, a single return crystal grasped tightly. Do I continue on, or do I back out? If it was in the past, he'd not hesitate and choose the latter. That was how he managed to survive all those raids with his pathetic stats. Everyone said that him surviving until now was a miracle, but well, he was trying to be smart about his choices, actually. However, the story was different now. He didn't want to retreat here. He felt that if he turned away to leave now, then he'd never be able to take another step forward in his life. I've retreated enough times already, right? Wouldn't it be okay for him to jump in headlong, at least once in his life? Jin-Woo pocketed the return crystal. His steps climbing down the steps to the second floor was light. Unlike the dungeons of the gates, there was a thing called respawn within the instant dungeon. While he was sweeping away every single monster found on the second floor, all the monsters on the first respawned. While he went back upstairs to deal with them, monsters on the second floor respawned. So on and so forth. Jin-Woo hopped between the first and second floor and killed monsters until his level no longer rose up. Who knows when he'll ever run into another opportunity like this one. Along the way, he got so used to this place that he was able to predict from where and how the monsters would try to attack him. A monkey, falling from the ceiling. He lightly evaded the claws of the monkey-type monster falling from the ceiling and stabbed it in the chest with his sword. And then, he orderly sliced the necks of the black panther-like creatures jumping at him from his sides. You've killed a blade claw briga. You've killed a black shadow raisin. And with these 3, he had arrived at the end of the second floor. He had cleared out the second floor once more. However, his level hadn't been moving from 15 for a long time now. It seemed that reaching that high was the limit for the first 2 floors. With him being level 15, his stats had risen up by quite a lot. His agility was now almost at 25. He finally got to feel the difference between the agility and the strength stat when the former hit the value of 20. The agility did not increase his speed, but rather, it was as if the opponent's movement had become far slower in his perception, instead. Exactly like watching a slow-motion video. The scenes of the monkey falling from the ceiling and panthers pouncing on him played out in slow motion. Should he describe it as him being able to manipulate the time flow as he wished? It became easier to evade enemies' attacks, and it also became easier to hit them as well. As the word implied, he had indeed become more agile. The so-called speed was wholly dependent on who was looking at it. The higher his agility stat, the bigger the difference between him and his enemies would become. From their perspective, he'd look as if he was moving at an unbelievably quick speed. If both the strength and agility increase concurrently, their synergy should be pretty incredible. That was his final assessment of the agility stat. Besides all that, Jin-Woo shifted his gaze away. What should I do now? He was looking at the stairs leading down to the 3rd floor. There was a reason why he continued to hunt in the first 2 floors even though there was a way to go even lower. It's giving me the creeps. With his perception stats so much higher, he could sense the aura of something ominous lurking down there far better than before. Without a doubt, something really strong was hiding somewhere down below. He didn't have to see it to know. Jin-Woo recalled the message he saw back by the entrance of this instant dungeon. You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find the return crystal. The existence of the boss. Jin-Woo had been roaming the first 2 floors in order to raise his levels until he couldn't anymore, all for the purpose of fighting this boss. He had prepared himself as much as he could, but when the time to actually go down there came, he was getting all sweaty and nervous. Jin-Woo lightly slapped both of his cheeks. I mean, I've entered a dungeon, so I can't just leave without taking a look at what this boss looks like, now can I? A certain amount of tension was a must in order to maintain the peak condition. And this amount was just about right for him. Jin-Woo gripped the sword tightly with both of his hands, slowly descended the steps. Could he have been mistaken when the steps felt unusually longer than before? He swallowed dried saliva down. The lighting was worse than the first 2 floors, but there was no problem with seeing where he was going. Is it because of my perception stat? He couldn't help but feel that his eyesight had improved greatly. He cautiously climbed lower until eventually spotting the railway tunnel used by the subway trains. No, he saw where the railway used to be. The tunnel that should have been used by trains was now filled with jet black liquid. Instead, what is this? Rather than a subway tunnel, it was more like a lake or a river now. Just as Jin-Woo took one more step forward to take a closer look, a long log-like object shot out from the surface of the black water. It's fast. The thing that arrived in front of his nose in the blink of an eye was not a log, but a snake with the thickness rivaling one, actually. Taken by surprise, Jin-Woo could only swing the sword and strike the head of the snake away from him. Jin-Woo's eyes opened wider. What the hell? He did succeed in deviating that direction of the lunging snake, but his trusty steel longsword ended up breaking apart from the impact. Jin-Woo looked back in surprise. The snake must have been surprised by his counterattack as well, because it didn't try to follow up right away, but instead chose to simply glare at him while coiling itself up a distance away. The ruler of the swamp, poison-fanged blue Kasaka. Jin-Woo could clearly see the orange-colored name of the monster. It was a creature incomparably faster and hardier than those with their names written in white. Even then, for a sword reinforced with magic energy to break like that. Jin-Woo swallowed nervously and cautiously studied the boss monster called Kasaka. Blue scales covering its entire body gleamed in an oily manner. As if it had draped itself with thick armor, those scales had no gaps to speak of. Sword strikes wouldn't have worked in the first place. It'd be the same story for punches too. When Jin-Woo's thoughts arrived there, the Kasaka must have finished its own analysis on its prey, because it finally lunged at him once more. No matter how one looked at it, it was a frightening turn of speed, that's for sure. Jin-Woo narrowed his eyes. It's coming. When he concentrated hard, he could now clearly see the attack of the Kasaka, which was something he couldn't even properly decipher in the beginning. This was all due to the increased agility stat. Just before the Kasaka opened its maws wide and tried to swallow him, Jin-Woo swiftly sidestepped and let the attack brush past him. At the same time, he wrapped his arms around the creature and caught it in a headlock. He then tightened his grip. Jin-Woo's strength stat was almost at 50. An unbelievably powerful pressure tightened around the snake's main artery. The snake could not escape from his grip and thrashed around as if it was in pain. Jin-Woo gritted his teeth and strengthened his arms even more. Jin-Woo's body slammed against the walls and on the floor, but he never released his arms. If I didn't raise my levels as high as I could before coming here. There was literally no end to wondering about what-ifs and what could-have-beens. However, all kinds of thoughts still swirled in Jin-Woo's head. If he didn't raise his level to the limit, if his strength stat wasn't so illogically high, then he'd have gone through incredible hell in order to kill the Kasaka. No, he might even have died here. So, his decision not to come down right away proved to be the smart one. His choice was indeed the right one. Crack. Accompanied by a rather awful noise, the skull of Kasaka gave in and cracked apart. You have killed the ruler of the swamp, poison-fanged blue Kasaka. As expected of a boss mob, his level rose up by 2 after killing the Kasaka. Jin-Woo tightly clenched his fists. The level that had been stagnating at 15 had jumped up to 17. In just a single day, he crazily raised his level from 1 all the way up to 17. However, no one hunted boss mobs for experience points. Indeed, if it was a boss mob, then it'd be all about the loot drops. When he started checking out the dead snake, 2 spots of light began gleaming from somewhere within its limp body. 2 items because it was a boss? His expression one of elation, Jin-Woo reached out towards the spots of light. Tearing. You have discovered item, Poison Fong of Kasaka. Take it? You have discovered item, Poison Sack of Kasaka. Take it? Take them all. As soon as he said those words, a dagger made out of a bone and a small pouch with liquid in it appeared on his palms. Item, Poison Fong of Kasaka. Attack plus 25. A dagger fashioned from the poison fong of the Kasaka. There are traces of the Kasaka's poison on it, so when attacking, it will cause paralysis and bleeding status effects. Can be stored in the inventory, or can be sold at the store. Status effect paralysis. The target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect bleeding. The target stamina will be reduced by 1% per second. Jin-Woo nodded his head. A dagger made not out of bone, but from the fong. It's not a bad item with those options, yeah? Next up was the pouch. Item, Poison Sack of Kasaka. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasaka. Can be found very rarely when hunting Kasakas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles. Affect the iron scales of Kasaka. 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect damaged muscles. Strength minus 35. Jin-Woo's expression alternated between joy and anguish. The poison fong of Kasaka was a good weapon to replace the broken longsword. Not only did it possess over twice the attack power, but he really liked the 2 status effects of paralysis and bleeding too. However, this poison sack is a bit. Initially, he was really pleased to find an item with the A rarity rating, but when reading the description, he realized this was not something he could feel completely chuffed about. Of course, that effect of reducing all physical damage taken by 20% was a great option befitting an A-rank item. However, it also carried a fatal penalty of decreasing his strength stat by 35. It'd be a really painful loss for him, especially when he invested all of his points on increasing his strength stat. Maybe he might be able to use this thing only when his strength stat had risen so high that the loss of 35 points wouldn't affect him in the slightest, which should be in the distant future. It was impossible to drink it right now. For the time being, I should just hold on to it. With a rueful expression, he stored both inside his inventory. Maybe, if an A-rank dagger and a C-rank medicine came out, then he might have felt not as bad as he did now. Well, he'd have just gotten rid of the C-rank medicine if it was useless, after all. It was then a new message popped up. With the death of the boss, the interior of the dungeon will revert back to its original state. Suddenly, his sights blurred for a bit, and then they were restored back to normal, along with a slight bit of dizziness assaulting his senses. When he took a look around, he found himself inside a normal subway station. The lights overhead shone brightly, and the black liquid filling up the tunnel was all gone too. But where is everyone? Not just people, but even trains were strangely absent. He even checked the time while thinking that the trains had stopped running for the day because it was so late already, but the clock was indicating 10 p.m. He entered the Hapjeong station around the lunch hour, so he had spent over 9 hours inside that dungeon. I was in there for a long time, wasn't I? If it weren't for his tiredness stat being refreshed every time he leveled up, he'd have keeled over from the accumulated fatigue several times by now. Isn't it still too early for the trains to stop running? Jin-Woo tilted his head as not one train showed up, no matter how long he stood there waiting. He decided to leave the station for the time being. While he was trudging towards the exit, he couldn't spot a single person. But as he climbed up the steps to get to the surface, someone shouted at Jin-Woo from above. Who goes there? Who knew that the voice of another person would sound this welcoming? Jin-Woo quickly raised his head. He saw a soldier wielding a rifle. Why you coming out from there? Haven't you heard the broadcasts? The expression of the soldier was so serious that even Jin-Woo's own expression hardened in an instant. Did something happen? How can you even say that? The soldier approached closer, But then he spotted the broken sword in Jin-Woo's hand. After it broke, it could no longer be stored in the inventory, and Jin-Woo didn't feel like leaving it behind, so he just carried it outside like this. Seeing that, the light within the soldier's eyes changed rapidly. He then carefully studied Jin-Woo's current appearance. Now that this soldier had taken a closer look, Jin-Woo's clothes displayed various hints of the youth participating in many fierce battles recently. The crumpled expression of the soldier lightened up in an instant. "Are you a hunter by any chance?" "Yes, I am one, but…" Please forgive me." "This way, please. Let me guide you there." Sensing that his troubles might get more complicated if he said there's been a misunderstanding here, Sung Jin-Woo decided to quietly follow the soldier's guidance for now. Jin-Woo then swept his gaze around his vicinity. Now that I see, the surrounding atmosphere felt rather suspicious. The streets were totally deserted. The only people he could see were the soldiers and the members of the police. Also, corpses belonging to monsters, destroyed cars, and buildings with cracks running up their walls. Jin-Woo realized what had happened here. A gate must have opened up nearby. Something like that almost never happened nowadays with the well-established hunter system in place, but sometimes, a gate would appear in a remote area, and it'd go unnoticed for a while. As a result, no one would come around to close it in time. When such an event unfolded, soldiers from the nearby bases were dispatched in order to buy some time until hunters could arrive on the scene. Of course, the weapons of soldiers didn't work against the monsters. However, in order to facilitate the evacuation of civilians, someone had to be offered up as sacrifices. In other words, they were to become cannon fodder. A role someone had no choice but to perform had been saddled on the shoulders of this nation's youths. "Thank you." The soldier walking up ahead thanked Jin-Woo out of the blue. "Pardon me?" "Well, because hunters such as yourself fight hard, we are able to go home at the end of the day, you see." He said thanks. That was something Jin-Woo wanted to say to the soldier. Instead, soldiers to the hunters, and hunters to soldiers. As befitting those fighting to protect someone, or even something, they were expressing their gratitude against each other. The soldier's expression brightened after he received the radio transmission. "I've received a word that the monsters in the vicinity have been dealt with, and only the biggest one remains." Jin-Woo nodded his head. He didn't need to hear the soldier's explanation to know. He could actually sense the presence of a powerful life form nearby. And he could even sense several auras of hunters surrounding it too. The enhanced perception stat was transmitting crucial information in the form of sensations and feelings. And that's how Jin-Woo got to figure it out almost immediately. That thing is the boss. Soon enough, the creature could be seen in the distance. In the empty, open space not too far from him, a dozen or so hunters were surrounding a giant made out of rock. It was as tall as a telephone pole. It was a golem-type monster. The soldier spat out a gasp of fear as he took a step backwards. Perhaps it was his first time seeing one, since the moment he saw it, his entire body had stiffened noticeably. But then again, most people would react in a similar fashion. The difference between seeing a monster for real and seeing it on a TV or a computer monitor was like heaven and earth, after all. Unlike him, Jin-Woo remained calm and observed the unfolding situation. "Healers, concentrate your healing on the tanker. We're also doing our best." "Why isn't it dying already? What are the damage dealers doing? It's not even remotely close enough to dying, is it? The monster's defenses are too strong, and we just don't have enough magic-type hunters in our group." Because they had been summoned out here in haste, none of them seemed to be high-ranked hunters. Both their defenses and attacks didn't look that effective at all. Because of that, hunters couldn't avoid being embroiled in the protracted battle of attrition. When the golem slammed its massive stone fist downward, the hunter acting as the tanker had no choice but to kneel down just for a brief second. The tanker vomited out a mouthful of blood. "No! The tanker might die at this rate. What do you want me to do? My magic energy reserve is completely empty, you know. Hasn't the support from high-ranked hunters arrived yet?" These hunters looked like they had reached their limit. Jin-Woo's gaze, as he took all of these in, gleamed quite sharply. "If it's only that much, I can do this." Jin-Woo slowly took several steps back. This golem-type boss might possess the high defense, but its rank was probably lower than its scary outer appearance might suggest. Just from the aura it emitted, it was definitely weaker than the boss of the instant dungeon, the poison-fanged blue whatever. So, if I could just render its high defenses to nothing. What's needed right now was a powerful strike that could penetrate past that dumb rock giant's defenses. Jin-Woo got to enough distance away and took a position of throwing something. The muscles in the arm holding the broken sword began swelling up quite violently out of the blue. Thick, pulsing veins even popped up on the back of his hand too. All of his physical strength was concentrated in his right arm. A short while after that, the arm pulled back taut like the string of a bow was shot forward at the speed of sound. Go! The view of the rank D hunter, Lee Han-soo, was turning dark. He couldn't continue on anymore. His prized shield had begun developing cracks as well. As if their magic energy had been depleted, the amount of healing magic hitting him from the healers had decreased quite noticeably. At this rate, every single one of them would die for sure. Lee Han-soo had to make a decision now. The only feasible plan here was for him to buy enough time so the other hunters could safely escape from here. And at a later time, hunters with higher ranks show up to kill this golem. Or we all die together here. Cold sweat drops formed on Lee Han-soo's forehead. He finally firmed up his resolve. Lee Han-soo shouted out while looking back. "Leave this to me and you all gotta." It was at this moment that Lee Han-soo saw it. Something flew towards here as it gleamed coldly in the night air. Actually, he could only sense that he had seen something, but his eyes couldn't really pick up on anything tangible. It was that fast. That something slammed into the golem's head and it grandly exploded. What the hell? Lee Han-soo's eyes opened up super wide. The headless golem began tottering dangerously. The hunters began roaring out in elation only then. They focused their attacks once more. It's working. Our attacks are working. It's falling. A little bit more. Just a bit more and we'll win. It seemed that none of them had noticed the object flying in from somewhere because they were too focused on attacking the monster. With the sole exception of Lee Han-soo standing right in front of the golem, that was. Golem comes down roaring one last time. In the end, the golem toppled over. The heavy body fell down to the ground and kicked up a mighty dust storm. Hunters all cried out in elation and celebrated their victory. We did it. We killed it. Only Lee Han-soo had seen everything unfold, and he slowly shook his head. No, our attacks didn't even work on this guy. Lee Han-soo hurriedly searched around the vicinity of the fallen golem. Just what did destroy the head of this rock giant? Lee Han-soo thought out aloud and searched around. Eventually, he discovered the remnants of a broken sword. Although there were some traces of magic energy within it, it was basically a cheap, plain steel sword. Someone threw something this worthless and destroyed a boss-level golem capable of brushing off the combined attacks of 10+ hunters? Suddenly, he forgot what he wanted to say. Lee Han-soo silently alternated his gaze between the corpse of the golem and the broken sword, before he ran past the cheering hunters and in the direction the sword flew in from. "Excuse me." He found a dazed soldier standing there. "Pardon? You talking to me?" "That's right." When a hunter with a hulking physique hurriedly rushed towards him, the soldier couldn't help but swallow nervously with a stiff face. That was how great the pressure a hunter gave off to regular people. Lee Han-soo displayed the broken sword and asked, "Did you throw this?" "It's actually..." The soldier looked behind him, only for his eyes to go round in surprise. "But there was a hunter standing right behind me, though?" Of course, there was no one there now. While the flustered soldier was looking around the vicinity, Lee Han-soo scratched the back of his neck and stared at the broken sword. That power, that destructive power. Could it have been a high-rank hunter? He'd never know, since the protagonist had disappeared already. Around the same time, Jin-Woo was on his way home. An old and decrepit apartment located on the outskirts of the city. Jin-Woo's home was on the 8th floor of this building. A person stepping outside the house in the early hours of dawn would inevitably be cautious in their movements. Well, they might end up accidentally waking up their family members, after all. That was why Sung Jin-woo was silently closing the front door to her home, so that her brother wouldn't wake up from his sleep as she was about to leave for school. But then, You going to school now? She was taken by surprise when a voice came from near her, and she quickly turned around to look. What the heck? Appa, you were up already? Yup, been a while since I was up, you know. Hey, have fun today and be careful on the road. Gina watched her brother's back and tilted her head. Now that is so strange. Appa actually woke up before I did. One would never call Jin-Woo a lazy type, but Gina was always the first one to start the day until now simply because she was unusually industrious, which was quite unfitting for her age group. Now that I think about it, her older brother's back seemed broader than before, for some reason. No way that's true. A human's body wasn't made out of some rubber band, so how could it make any sense for him to expand and contract in a space of a few days? I've probably made a mistake. Gina shook her head again and hurriedly walked towards her school. Jin-Woo entered his room and sat on the edge of his bed. There was a matter he had resolved right away. Stats. Available points to distribute, 12. He had been saving up the stat points earned from the quests of the past 4 days. He made sure to complete the daily quest every day. Of course, he also didn't forget to always check his rewards too. However, he hadn't distributed the points until now. The issue was, this is tough. Indeed, he found it rather difficult to come to a decision. The strength stat? It was a wonderful stat, that's for sure. He hadn't regretted it once, investing all of his points into this one back when he started this thing. Agility. This was also a pretty darn good stat too. Against weak enemies, it only helped a little, but as the levels of his opponents rose up in the future, no doubt he'd be relying on this stat more and more. Well, the speed was a relative thing after all. And then, stamina and perception. It'd be great if his stamina was high, obviously. And this perception turned out to be very useful as well. Finally, intelligence. This was the problem child. He hadn't been able to figure out this stat's uses yet. His level had increased by quite a lot, but he didn't feel any smarter than before. His memories didn't seem to have improved, nor did his ability to calculate quickly either. I think it has to be related to magic. This stat might be something he didn't really need for the time being, which left strength, stamina, agility, and perception. Even then, this is really tough. Although he now had one less stat to choose from, he was still in a dilemma here. He didn't feel too confident at all. At least he understood that the synergy between strength and agility was very good. Even if he could deal big damage, it would be meaningless if he couldn't hit his target. On the flip side, even if he could hit accurately all the time, as long as he could not deal enough damage, it'd be a waste of time, too. In that regard, one could say that strength and agility formed a set. Since my strength stat is so high, I should raise agility up to match it. If he decided to raise his agility stat, then he had to delay raising stamina instead. Well, the synergy between agility and stamina wasn't so good, after all. The thing was, when agility was raised, the odds of getting struck by the enemy would decrease. But on the other hand, stamina was a stat that only displayed its true worth when the opponent actually damaged him. Of course, I do need at least the bare minimum of stamina. But raising both agility and stamina at the same time was a rather inefficient method, at least from his perspective. After a lengthy deliberation, he decided on the order of priority. The first one was agility. The second, perception. Finally, stamina. His strength was plenty high enough, so he'd defer it for now. And as he was planning to raise his agility, perception took priority over stamina. After deciding so, Jin-Woo spent 2 points on strength. Tiering. Strength 50. Available points to distribute, 10. Well, he wanted to raise strength to the round and even 50 for the time being. That was how normal human beings behaved, no? Then he spent 8 points on agility. Agility, 35. Available points to distribute, 2. The reason for that was also not that special. He just wanted the last number to be a 5. It's far more preferable to see the numbers ending in increments of 5. Strength 50 and agility 35. Seeing them end in the multiples of 5, he suddenly felt rather pleased with himself for no reason whatsoever. And as for the last 2 points, Jin-Woo invested them on perception next. With this, the points distribution had come to an end. Perception, 29. Available points to distribute, 0. The only sticking point would be the fact that he couldn't quite bring perception up to 30. Well, I don't have any more points left, so it can't be helped, I guess. Other than that, everything was okay. He figured that it'd be fine to raise stamina and agility through leveling up. So then I guess that's it. No matter who you were, you would be hard-pressed to feel 100% satisfied with everything. Since he had thought about his choices for a long while, he was more or less happy with them like this. It was then he could hear the telephone ringing from the living room. Is the association calling me? In the past, he didn't want to participate in the raids, so he did his best to ignore the calls until the last possible moment. But right now, he was raring to go and test out his raised abilities against various monsters. Jin-Woo quickly snatched up the receiver. This is the hunter Sung Jin-Woo. You finally picked up the phone. Too bad, it wasn't a call from the association. A rueful sigh leaked out of his mouth. Learner Jin-Woo, why is it so difficult to get in touch with you lately? The voice coming from the speaker was a familiar one. It'd been 4 years already since he graduated from high school and therefore stopped being a learner, but the owner of the building always attached that prefix in front of Jin-Woo's name ever since taking in both the Sung siblings when they were still young kids. I'm really sorry about that. I was admitted to the hospital because of an incident a few days ago. So that's what happened. I should have known. Well, there's that, and learner Jin-Woo. The rent for this month hadn't come in yet, so what should I do? If it's a bit too tough for you, should I delay it for a month or two? No. It's fine. I'll send the money in a bit later. But don't force yourself, you hear? Trying to look after your mom and your younger sister, you're going through so much hardship there. I know money is important, but don't forget to take care of your body too. Thank you. I won't forget that. The call ended there. Jin-Woo pulled out the bank balance book from one of the drawers. The remaining amount in the account was only around 800,000. A groan leaked out from his mouth. After paying the rent of 500,000, he'd have 300,000 left for the month's living expenses. And the rent could be that low only because the apartment building was located on the remote outskirts of the city, as well as it being old and decrepit, plus the owner of the building taking into consideration Jin-Woo's troubles and not raising the amount for the last couple of years. There was no way anyone would be able to find an apartment to rent for 500 grand per month nowadays. And trying to survive on 300 grand for the whole month was even tougher. I gotta make some money first. Jin-Woo decided to take care of the urgent matters first. He was no longer the same guy from a few days ago who couldn't even kill a single E-ranked monster and shiver in fear. How did hunters make money? The best way was to kill monsters. Hunters ranked S or A could get sponsorships, shoot commercials, make appearances in TV shows and the like to hoover up a lot of money, as much as some chaebol made, but their number was exceedingly few. Indeed, there were too few of them. Excluding those too few ones at the top, the majority of the hunters had to go to a dungeon in order to make money. Higher the rank, the greater the experience. The earnings would be decided by each individual's own capabilities. For someone like Jin-Woo, who was ranked E, worked only for the association, and had no experience in dungeons rated higher than C, such a condition was an incredibly tough one to overcome. Jin-Woo's expression scrunched up into something unsightly. Disregarding the conditions, for now, if I could just enter an assault team, now that would be great. He took a look at the job postings on the Hunter website's bulletin boards and called a few numbers, but all of them turned out to be a waste of time. No one wanted to work with the Hunter ranked E. Those hunters seeking outside help via job postings were freelancers almost all of the time, which meant that they were responsible for preserving their own necks, so understandably, they paid close attention when forming a raid team or letting someone into theirs. These people didn't possess enough abilities to enter big guilds, but their ranks were too high to work for the association. They were all kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place, but unable to go either way. Even then, these hunters still earn more than 10 million a month, as far as I know. It was the case of high risk, high reward. Since they put their lives on the line, the profit they earned was just as big at the end of the day. It wasn't for nothing that hunters were the targets of envy from the general populace. From Jin-Woo's perspective, he could only get impatient, though. Should I just take the rank reassignment test and increase my rank right away? Eventually, Jin-Woo shook his head. He knew that was a stupid thing to do, no matter how hard he thought about it. A hunter ranked E suddenly became a high-ranked one. Whether that was A or B, or maybe even C, it didn't matter. The reawakening would always become a hot topic of conversation. The masses loved nothing more than a good gossip, and hunters just so happened to be a good subject to chew on. The old saying went that, if there were 5 mouths, then there would be 10 eyes. Meaning, the more people talked about you, the more eyes would be focused on you. His stats would continue to rise up in the future, so it'd be only a matter of time before his special constitution was discovered by the others. A hunter who can raise his abilities up higher? He becomes stronger as time goes by? Who is this hunter? How can he do something like that? What should we do to become like him? Without a doubt, many people would express their interest. After all, there hadn't been a hunter like him before. And among those expressing interest, there would be those who try to use him, or reveal their hostile intentions towards him as well. If just one of those possesses incredible power, just imagining it gave him the chills. He was far too weak as he was now. Until he possessed enough power to protect himself, he didn't want the world to know of his existence. Meaning, taking the test to reassign his ranks was out of the question. But I still need to make money here. However, that didn't mean he could go out and get a part-time job either. He didn't know when the association would call him for a raid. By raiding a dungeon, he'd get to earn both money and experience, so how could he blow that important chance just to scrounge up a few bucks by working in a local store? While he was seriously deliberating on what he needed to do, he spotted something in the bulletin board that caught his attention. Emergency. Searching for a single hunter, regardless of the rank. Needs to come right away. Jin-Woo's eyes shot right open. This posting had popped up literally a second ago. When he hurriedly checked the contents of the posting, it wasn't too far from his home, too. Jin-Woo quickly picked the phone up. The other side must have been in a hurry as well because he answered the call even before the first ringtone. Jin-Woo stated his reasons for calling as precisely as possible and calmly waited for the answer. Oh, you are an E rank? The response from the other side was better than expected. It's fine. We just need someone to show up and fill up the head count, that is all. However, it's a gate-ranked C, so it'd be hard for you to hunt there. So, well, just split the profits among ourselves and we just give you 2 million in cash. How about it? Can you come right away? 2 million for a day's work. It was a lot of money for simply being there to make up the numbers. A rather tempting offer this was. It was regrettable that he couldn't get to share the dungeon's loot, but he might end up losing out on making 2 million just by trying to be too greedy. For now, let's put out the urgent fires first. Such an opportunity wouldn't come around every day, after all. 2 million was enough for him and his sister's monthly living expenses. Jin-Woo said yes to the offer. He'll be there in less than 15 minutes. Jin-Woo only needed 1 minute to get ready, quickly grabbed himself a taxi, and headed off to the meeting point. 9 people were already there, waiting for his arrival. The man who looked like the leader of the group waved his hand at Jin-Woo. Hey, over here. It was a bearded man with a fairly big physique. He smiled softly and walked closer while speaking to Jin-Woo. Are you Mr. Sung Jin-Woo? That's correct. Egu, it's a relief that you found the right place so quickly. I guess this is fate, so how about we greet each other before we get started? The bearded man briefly introduced the members of his team. The 8 of them, including himself, were regular teammates that worked together all the time, while the remaining guy was someone who also came here to make up the numbers, just like Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo greeted other team members and studied their countenance carefully. Thanks to his enhanced perception stat, he was able to more or less sense everyone's capabilities. 5 with a similar rank. 4 with a slightly lower rank than them. 5 rank CS and around 4 with D or lower. There was a regulation when attempting to clear a gate rated C. The minimum number of a party had to be 10 hunters, and more than half had to be at least ranked C or higher. Only then did the association issue a permit. It seemed that them claiming to do all the hunting and he only needed to be there to make up the numbers didn't sound like an empty boasting after all. Now we're done with introductions, let me briefly explain the important points to remember. The bearded man introduced himself as Hwang Dong-suk, a tanker rated C. He displayed a relaxed atmosphere as if he possessed plenty of experience raiding dungeons. As he began describing the situations one had to keep an eye out for in the middle of a raid, someone came closer to Jin-Woo. "Excuse me. Looks like we're both pieces of fluff in this party, huh?" He was none other than the other hunter Hwang Dong-suk had brought along in order to fill up the numbers. He was a young man with a bright expression. However, unlike Jin-Woo, he was actually going to participate in battles. He was ranked D, so he had the right to do so. His name was Eugene-ho, age 22. Jin-Woo lightly nodded his head as Eugene-ho greeted him, before shifting his gaze away. Eugene-ho seemingly wanted to carry on with the conversation, but ended up scratching the back of his head awkwardly. He soon returned to his spot. "Hyungnim, let's stop here and go in already. We'll be the ones to kill them all, so what's the point of explaining it in detail like that? Right, my ears might get blocked up with wax at this rate." When the original team members all raised their voices, Hwang Dong-suk laughed jovially and clapped his hands. "Enough with the explanations, let's get going." Everyone got ready to enter the gate. Before we enter, you two take a look at these." Hwang Dong-suk pushed forward a page of a document to Jin-Woo and Eugene-ho each. It turned out to be a simple contract. "Write your names on the bottom and sign it, and we're good to go." The contents said, had not participate in any hunting, had not participate in sharing of the loot, and when the raid was over, had be paid 2 million won right away. The terms were the same as what he heard over the phone. However, they were not the ones to catch his attention. "I have to promise not to question them regardless of whatever incident happens inside the dungeon." Unlike the raids organized by the association, one would not be able to claim for compensation if something happened during a raid organized by the freelancers. One of the reasons why hunters couldn't get a life insurance either. One had to look after one's own neck, in other words. Only now did it feel real that Jin-Woo had entered an assault team. While confirming the clauses, Jin-Woo sneaked a glance at Eugene-ho's contract. As expected, his was different. Besides the promised 2 million, he was also going to share in the loot as well. Before signing the document, Jin-Woo asked Hwang Dong-suk, "What am I supposed to do when we're inside?" "Nothing too particular. Just follow us and help us carry the luggage, that's all." "Your luggage?" Hwang Dong-suk pointed at the huge backpack one of his dongsangs pulled out from the minivan. "You'll be carrying around lunchboxes to eat when inside, several sets of clothing and equipment, first aid kits and some other stuff." "Wait, first aid kits when entering a dungeon?" Jin-Woo couldn't help but question this. "You are not entering with a healer? I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party." "Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine." Hwang Dong-suk smiled awkwardly. To think, this team just barely met the required minimum number of hunters. One of the additional members mistook a raid as a blind date or something, and the composition of the assault team only happened to feature a tanker and damage dealers, and not one healer. Even after hearing that there was no healer present, that oblivious additional member didn't seem too bothered by the revelation. It was the sure proof that he was a newbie. Jin-Woo smirked inwardly. They are a bunch of wannabes. However, he still signed on the contract. Not because he needed that 2 million, but because he knew very well that he could protect himself now. "Here it is. I'm done." Hwang Dong-suk confirmed the signatures of both men and shouted out in a loud voice as if he was feeling really pleased today. "Okay. Let's get going, everyone." The party headed straight to the location of the gate. It was in the middle of the halted construction site for an apartment complex. The economy nowadays isn't so good, but still. Hwang Dong-suk clicked his tongue. Like large tombstones, unfinished apartment buildings stood still sporadically, imparting a certain sense of foreboding to all who looked at them. Could a cemetery of giants feel this way to observers? "Did you know?" Eugene-ho had walked closer to Jin-Woo and whispered softly. "That, while the employees and the investors are going through hell at the moment, the CEO of the project ran off to overseas 2 months ago along with 900 billion? Jin-Woo gave the other guy plenty of hints, but it seemed like Eugene-ho didn't want to leave his side at all. Well, with the exception of Jin-Woo here, all 8 of them originally belonged to one team, so it'd be hard to get along with them that easily. "Hyung, are you always this quiet?" Before anyone had noticed it, the honorific had become Hyung. Jin-Woo couldn't ignore this kid anymore. "Don't you know how to take the hint?" Well, I've never lived while worrying about taking hints, so Was this guy simply a good-natured, or just brainless? Jin-Woo wordlessly scratched the side of his head as he stared at Eugene-ho and that bright smile of his. However, it was indeed true that Jin-Woo would get unusually nervous when he got nearer a gate. But it was par for the course, really. To other hunters, raids might come across as a legitimate source of income, but to Jin-Woo, each and every one he participated so far had been a desperate, bitter struggle to make ends meet. Head get tense because of all the painful memories stuck forever in his head. It's over here. Hwang Dong-suk's steps came to an end. The hunters all let out a surprised gasp. Hwang Hyung, is this really a gate rated C? But isn't it too big? You think the association was lying to us? They said that investigators came around here twice already. A hole in the air, floating like a black hole. People took to calling it a gate. Its rank was assigned according to the waves of magical energy emission coming from inside. Folks from the association would stop by first to assign a rank to each one. After that, individuals or guilds wanting to clear the gate could follow the procedure and apply for a permit. Gates ranked A or B were, most of the time, left to the big guilds. Well, they were too difficult for freelancers to clear, after all. So, assault parties formed by freelancers took care of the gates ranked lower than that. Which meant that a gate ranked C was effectively the hardest one for hunters not affiliated with anyone to clear. Hwang Dong-suk stood in front of the gate and looked back at his team. They'll be entering first. Do your best to keep up, everyone. The tanker entered first, and the other hunters began entering one by one. You never know, so Jin-Woo lightly stretched himself just in case. Next to him, Eugene-ho began pulling out his own equipment from his bag. The sword and the shield coming out from his bag gleamed attractively under the light. Even a casual glance could tell that they were very expensive. They were definitely not something a newbie hunter could organize on his own. Hang on, he said that he never had to take hints before, so does that mean he's from a well-to-do family? Jin-Woo formed a surprised expression. Perhaps sensing Jin-Woo's gaze on him, Eugene-Woo confidently and bravely stood in front. Hyung, you said that you're ranked E, right? Don't worry, I'll protect you. Just stick close by me. Jin-Woo scratched the back of his head. Just who would protect who? Thanks for the sentiment. Let's go in as well. Regardless of how Jin-Woo felt, they still followed in afterwards and safely entered the gate. The interior of the dungeon was eerily quiet. Not only that, but it was also completely dark too. Hwang Dong-suk issued his first order. Hey Gyuhwan? I need a light. All right. The magic-related hunter Jo Gyuhwan created a ball of a light in midair. The surroundings became bright immediately. Hwang Song-suk lowered his shield and tilted his head slightly. What the hell? Where are all the monsters? I wonder. There's no light in here either. Now normally, there should have been luminous stones found here and there inside cave-like dungeons and emitted some light to illuminate the way forward. However, this dungeon didn't have those. Eugene-ho whispered to Jin-Woo from the side. Hyung, could there be a dungeon without monsters in it? Shush. Jin-Woo gestured the younger man to keep quiet. Because Jin-Woo's ears were twitching. He could hear lots of footsteps coming from the distance. Jin-Woo spoke up. It's not that there aren't any, they just haven't arrived yet. Eugene-ho swallowed nervously after hearing that. Rumble. Soon, the party could hear what Jin-Woo had heard earlier on. Only then did Hwang Dong-suk realize something was amiss here. A dungeon with no luminous stones could mean what moves around in groups, lives in darkness, and rushes towards a source of light. Oh crap! The complexions of Hwang Dong-suk and his dongsangs became ashen all at the same time. It's bugs! Bugs are coming. Fuck it, man. Why the hell did it have to be god d******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************̈ They are coming. In front. From the other side of this lone passage, some things were madly rushing towards them in a large group. Wait, could this be an anthill? Don't say something that might jinx us, okay? Out of all the monster types, insects were the most troublesome to deal with. Their shells were quite hardy, they always moved around in large groups, and each individual possessed pretty high combat potential as well. And the worst of that lot just so happened to be the ant types. Countless hunters made a mistake and entered the ant hills only to lose their lives very quickly. Rumble, rumble. The sounds of the insect legs rustling on the ground noisily reverberated throughout the cave. It meant that they had come pretty close now. Hwang Dong-suk raised his shield right up below his chin. However, they couldn't see any insects even then. His dongsangs began raising a fuss from behind him. What's going on here? Why can't I see them? But they are close by, though? Dong-suk-hyung, can you see anything out in front? It was at this time that Jin-Woo shouted out. Above you. What? Hwang Dong-suk reflexively looked up. Rumble. Huge insects were running towards them on the ceiling. If they were discovered late even for a single second, those things would have jumped down on top of their heads. When fighting against monsters such as these insect types that formed large groups, the breaking down of the team's formation would mean death for everyone involved. If those were discovered too late, then Hwang Dong-suk felt a chill run down his spine. The silver lining here was that he couldn't spot a single ant-like creature among the various insects. He raised his voice and shouted out, "Fire! Fire and bring them down. Once they are on the ground, it'll attract the aggro." When a few monsters fell down after getting struck by the attacks of the hunters, the rest of them followed suit and landed back on the ground. Without a doubt, they were planning to engage the hunters. From here onwards, the capability of the tanker would prove to be crucial. Hwang Dong-suk activated his provocation skill to attract the gazes of all the monsters to himself. And as if they had a prior agreement, monsters all turned their heads to glare at Hwang Dong-suk at the same time. Over here, you'd *emin bugs. Dozens upon dozens of monsters rushed towards Hwang Dong-suk's position. His shield managed to defend against the attacks of the bugs without fail. The strong jaws and claws couldn't tear the shield in half. The tanker Hwang Dong-suk defended commendably well from the front, all stable and unmoving. Stand by, get in position, and get ready. Hwang Dong-suk waited for the right timing. Even when the bugs chomped and bit at him with terrifying intensity, Hwang Dong-suk remained steadfast and waited for the chance to counterattack. To make sure that the aggro wouldn't deviate from him even if the damage dealers landed a crippling blow to the enemies. This should be enough. With that thought, the real hunt had finally begun. To hunt, the real reason why the hunters were called hunters in the first place. Hwang Dong-suk roared out. Along with that short but manly shout, all the accumulated firepower of the team poured out on the marauding insect horde. The pained screams of the monsters rose up from here, there, and everywhere. Jin-Woo stood at the back and observed this situation as it unfolded. That was the contractual obligation he had to adhere to for this raid. He inwardly simulated how he'd fight alone as his eyes continued to take in the battle happening in front. How frustrating. Jin-Woo had to suppress his urges to rush out there several times already. He could see so many open gaps within the ranks of the monsters. And he also spotted the hunters missing those gaps and continued to commit simple errors. So, how could he not feel frustrated when he was not allowed to do anything and simply had to stand around? Even then, the damage to Hwang Dong-suk's team proved to be surprisingly non-existent. It was all because their teamwork was rather excellent. It seemed that the relaxed demeanor of Hwang Dong-suk before the raid began was not just for a show, after all. Jinsuka. 11 o'clock. Hyung, they are coming from your right too. Juntae, Sukmin, Gyuhwan. Take care of the right. Chiljin, your wrists swollen up. Retreat to the rear. Hwang Hyung, this ain't much to fret about. You want to go back only after sweeping clean the entrance? We don't know how long this raid will take, so stop being hasty from the get-go. Control your pace, got that? Roger that. Perhaps because they've been working together for so long, they were able to communicate quite smoothly. Being able to communicate quickly like this would inevitably result in an excellent teamwork as well. It was a world apart from the ragtag bunch of hunters brought together by the association. What's more surprising is that this kid turns out to be pretty handy too. Jin-Woo's gaze shifted over to Eugene-ho next. When a monster bit into his shield, he kicked it away and swung his sword quickly at it. The expensive sword easily separated the monster's head from its body. For a newbie rank D hunter, he was defending himself admirably well. His Kike** gear is filling up the hole left behind by his lack of skills and experience. Indeed, it was not for nothing that pretty much all hunters struggled hard to get themselves good equipment. When their gazes briefly met, Jin-Woo quickly raised his thumb up. Because of his expressions that looked as if he was desperately pleading for a positive response, Jin-Woo was left with no choice but to reciprocate the same gesture as well. Looking rather satisfied now, Jin-Woo turned around. Whatever the case may have been, the end of the battle was drawing nearer. Once the coast was more or less clear, Hwang Dong-suk issued another order to his dongsangs. Don't forget the magic crystals. We split them exactly 9 ways. This is my favorite part of the raid. Me too. Hwang Dong-suk confirmed his giggling dongsangs collecting the loot and walked closer to Jin-Woo. We survived all thanks to you. Excuse me? Well, you were the first one to alert us about the monsters coming up from above, weren't you? How did you know though? To us. A gut feeling. Jin-Woo came up with a half-cooked story on the spot. Quite obviously, he could. Well, we got lucky today. I don't even want to imagine what might have happened if we didn't discover them in time. Fuwu. Hwang Dong-suk patted his chest while speaking up. It was then. One of the hunters rummaging through the carcass of the insect gestured at Hwang Dong-suk to come closer. Hwang Hyung, please come over here for a sec. The dongsangs had all gathered in one spot. So, Hwang Dong-suk went there to join them as well. Something's a bit off about these crawlies. The hunters parted ways when Hwang Dong-suk arrived, allowing the bearded man to squat down and take a look at the surroundings. He couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary, though. No matter where he looked, all he could see was the dead insects. What's off about these? Hwang Dong-suk tilted his head. One of the dongsangs pointed at the leg of the insect monster closest to him. I'm pretty sure that wound didn't come from us. Hwang Dong-suk's expression crumpled slightly. He took a closer look before raising his voice. Something took a big bite out of it, doesn't it? Right? That's not the only one with wounds like that, you see. Looky here. This one, that one over there and over there too. Looks like that one's missing a pair of wings as well. Could these creepy crawlies have been beaten down already before fighting us? Hwang Dong-suk's expression hardened even more. Now he realized why the battle went off so smoothly when compared to the number of the monsters they had to fight. Could it be that these things were fighting against something else? Although it had been for the briefest of all brief moments, Jin-Woo still sensed the gazes of the several members of this team landing on him. Their eyes shifted away as soon as Jin-Woo displayed a hint of sensing them. With this, he was certain now. As I thought. His initial suspicions proved to be correct. Seeing that their teamwork was so good, they must have been fighting together for a long time already. And without anyone dying too. However, would such a thing be possible without a healer backing them up? No matter how good hunters were, they were still humans at the end of the day. Inevitably, they would slip up sooner or later. Well, only a short while ago, didn't their formation nearly break apart from the attacks of the bugs? A bigger picture finally formed inside Jin-Woo's head and a subtle smile formed on his lips. Maybe. I can use them to my advantage. As long as they acted within his calculations, that was. Hwang Dong-suk smiled and stood back up. Why don't we go in a little bit deeper? We might be able to clear this dungeon rather quickly if this keeps up. Hwang Dong-suk deliberately spoke up with a loud voice. He didn't do that for the sake of his dongsangs. Well, the original members of the team were already surrounding him, to begin with. In the meantime, Jin-Woo smiled brightly and approached closer to Jin-Woo. Hyung, did you see it? You saw it, right? With this, I kicked some serious monster asteriskes today, didn't I? Jin-Woo swung the sword around in the air. Seeing this, Jin-Woo quietly asked him. Hey, that sword and the shield, they are really expensive, right? Pardon? When I told my dad that I'd be participating in my first raid, he got them for me. Well, in that case, I think you should keep your wits about you too. Jin-Woo lightly patted Jin-Woo on his shoulder and followed after the other hunters walking deeper inside the dungeon. What is he talking about now, out of the blue? Jin-Woo tilted his head in confusion before chasing after the departing group. The cave seemed to go on forever. However, bizarrely enough, they hadn't come across a single monster as of yet. Since the dungeon was shaped like a long cavern, there was no way that they'd miss each other, too. Could it be that the crawlies at the entrance were everything? No way. Now that would be really strange. Still, there should be a boss at the end, right? Without one, why would a gate remain open, then? The opinions of the hunters were shared among themselves as they roamed the expansive but empty interior of this big dungeon. Hold it. Hwang Dong-suk in the lead suddenly stopped walking. He stopped so abruptly that people behind him ran into his back. The hunter whose nose had slammed into the head of the guy in front asked with a sullen expression. Ouch, what the heck? Hwang Hyung, what is it? Gyuhwana. I need a light over there. Jo Gyuhwan controlled the ball of light floating up in the air and redirected it further up ahead, exactly where Hwang Dong-suk had been pointing at. Holy shit. All these? All the hunters spat out low groans. The torn wings, legs, torsos, and even heads of the bugs' remains of the various dead bugs were strewn about everywhere as far as the light shone. The further into the cave the light got to, the greater the amount of the remains they could see. And also, a huge chamber located at the end of it all. That's the boss room. Someone muttered out softly. Hwang Dong-suk nodded his head. Everyone, get your equipment ready. The hunters quickly armed themselves. Nervousness was evident on the expressions of everyone present. With Hwang Dong-suk leading them in, the rest of the hunters cautiously and silently entered the boss room. However, their silence only lasted for a few seconds afterwards. Jackpot! The hunter with a red nose cried out. He was none other than the guy whose nose slammed into someone's back of the head. Originally, it was forbidden to shout out too loudly inside a dungeon, because there was a possibility that a monster they didn't have to fight might hear the noise and run towards where the hunters were. However, none of the others scolded the red nose for his mistake. Wowzers! How much could all of these be? It is a real jackpot, innit? Everyone was way too busy gasping out in admiration and happiness, that was why. Wait a second. When Jo Gyuhwan fixed the beam of light high up in the middle of the air, the situation within the room became clear for all to see, as well as the jewel-like stones jutting out from one of the walls of the cave. They are mana stones. The entire wall is made up of them. These mana stones reflected the light attractively and caused the eyes of the hunters to sparkle brightly in greed as well. Mana stones. They were one of the treasures that could be found inside dungeons. Although each stone possessed a lower amount of magic energy compared to a magic crystal extracted from a monster, they almost always were found in large quantity, so if one were able to mine them, one could earn a substantial profit. Besides, the mana stone deposit they had discovered was incredibly large. The entire wall of the huge cave was actually filled up with these stones. Let's do a quick calculation. A hunter with a mathematical brain began moving his fingers in a hurry. If we can mine them all, we could be earning as much as 1 billion. Even if we split 9 ways, we're looking at a payout of over 100 million per head. Oh. Smiles formed on the faces of the hunters. Eugene-ho had been staying at the back until then, and when he heard those words, he began poking Jin-Woo's side with his elbow. Hyung, show me your copy of the contract. Just trust me on this one. I'm pretty knowledgeable when it comes to law, you see. Jin-Woo shrugged his shoulders once and handed over the contract as requested. Eugene-ho walked over to Hwang Dong-suk while carrying that. Excuse me, seniors? I want to ask you about something. The eyes of the celebrating hunters immediately focused on Eugene-ho next. Eugene-ho flapped open Jin-Woo's contract and showed it to them. Mr. Leader, this is Jin-Woo Hyung's contract. As you can see, there is no clause about splitting the treasure beside the magic crystals earned from the hunting itself. Everyone there caught on to what Eugene-ho was trying to say. It's customary to share the treasures or other rare items found in a dungeon equally among all the participants of the raid. The splitting of the profit, in this case, is different from monopolizing the magic crystals of the monsters one hunted themselves. In other words, the mana stones had to be split 10 ways, not 9. The light within the hunter's eyes changed greatly, but Hwang Dong-suk simply smiled and took a step forward. Of course, we'll be sharing them equally. I know the rules well. We still have some things to take care of before that, though. Hwang Dong-suk raised his index finger and pointed to his front. Eugene-ho grandly flinched from that. He thought that he was the one being pointed at, actually. He shuddered slightly and turned his head around to take a look, and finally spotted a spider as huge as a house quietly squatting way over there. Eek! Eugene-ho began taking hurried steps backwards and covered his mouth after seeing the spider's appearance. As if it was fast asleep, the huge spider didn't even budge an inch from the spot. Around the creature, there were empty shells of the dead insects piled up as high as a mountain. A fair few of them were half-eaten, and there were bodily fluids mixed in among them as well, basically resembling a trash pit full of food waste. That's the boss. Did that thing eat the bugs inside the dungeon? Well, it sure did eat a lot, didn't it? Hunters glared at the spider and passed their opinions one at a time. Hwang Dong-suk called the others to gather around. Jin-Woo and Eugene-ho, too, stood in front of Hwang Dong-suk as well. As you all know very well, as soon as the boss is killed, the gate will start closing up. So, before we kill the spider, let's mine the mana stones first. Everyone nodded their heads. Cheoljin, did you bring along the equipment for the job? The man named Lee Cheoljin shook his head. Who knew we'd find mana stones inside a C-ranked dungeon? All the mining equipment is back in the van. Oh, come on now, dude. Didn't this Hyung always tell you to keep it around just in case? My bad. I'm really sorry about this. Lee Cheoljin grinned brightly and began apologizing to Hwang Dong-suk, the rest of his teammates, and even to Jin-Woo. Hwang Dong-suk spoke up while scratching the back of his head. What a bother this has become. In that case, why don't you two stay here and wait? We'll go outside and fetch the equipment in the meantime.
When the hunters tried to leave all at the same time, Eugene-ho formed a confused expression and quickly asked them, "Are you telling me and Jin-Woo Hyung to remain in the boss room?" Hwang Dong-suk smiled with his eyes and replied, "The B***** is yet to wake up even though we've been talking loudly for a while now. So, I'm sure nothing's going to happen here. Well, there are some things I want to speak to my boys, too, so we'll take a short smoke break as well. But don't worry, it won't take long." Jin-Woo listened to Hwang Dong-suk's rather detailed explanations and smirked inwardly. "You've finally revealed your true colors, huh? But all of you are leaving at the same time? Aren't you fools taking us way too lightly?" They were looking down on him because of his low rank, of course. As Jin-Woo expected him to, Hwang Dong-suk finally began to move. It was slightly different from the youth's expectation, though. It had been 4 years since he became a hunter. During that time, he had met many hunters. One of them was an ajusi named Mr. O. He had retired from the life of a freelancer but still showed up now and then to help out with the association's work. Be careful of geckos. Mr. O used to say that rather often. When one participated in raids, one would inevitably encounter a dangerous situation. When such an event happened, some crooked, immoral hunters would try to sacrifice someone who had been fighting alongside them until then, with some flimsy pretext of them not being in the same team to begin with, or that the other party was simply weaker than they were. All just to buy themselves some time for their safe escape. It was exactly like a gecko cutting off its own tail and running away. Cutting its tail off. Mr. O took to calling those types of hunters geckos, and such actions as cutting off one's tail. The regulation stated that in order to enter a gate ranked C, the minimum number of participants had to be 10. Yet, Hwang Dong-suk's team only had 8 members. I'm sure you already know that it's not easy to hire a healer if you're running your own assault party. Well, we've been doing things this way until now, so it'll be fine. Indeed, he stuck to only 8 members, even though his team had entered countless gates ranked C, so much so that he could say, "this way until now." They obviously have no reason to fill the last 2 spots. They needed a tail that they could cut off at any given moment, after all. There was a reason why they were willing to accept anyone, whether it was a hunter ranked E or a newbie. And now, Hwang Dong-suk had decided to abandon both Sung Jin-Woo and Eugene-ho for a slightly different reason than usual. But it's a good thing for me. Jin-Woo had figured out Hwang Dong-suk's intentions pretty early on but chose to say nothing. This was what he wanted, actually. However, unlike Jin-Woo, who was full of confidence, Eugene-ho was quite different, as he only started his work as a hunter today. Eugene-ho spoke with a voice full of worries. "No, wait a minute. That is just. Why don't we leave together?" It was then Jin-Woo spotted one of the hunters at the back raise his hand towards his hips. So, he placed his hand on Eugene-ho's shoulder and spoke. "It'll be fine. We'll guard this place." The hunter's hand heading towards his waist stopped. "Hyung?" Eugene-ho was quite surprised and confused, but Jin-Woo simply kept his mouth shut and lightly shook his head. "Sure, The kid was noisy and got on his nerves just a tad, but Jin-Woo wasn't planning to let him die here. After all, didn't he try to get the fair share for Jin-Woo just now, although that would have ultimately put him in a disadvantageous position? Hwang Dong-suk formed a smile as he looked at the two youths. Our van isn't parked too far, so it shouldn't take long. Well then. Hwang Dong-suk and his lackeys quickly escaped from the boss room. And their footsteps rapidly got further and further away. Jin-ho turned around and demanded answers from Jin-Woo. How could you say those things, Hyung? What if that thing wakes up? Without a doubt, he was quite scared of that spider. Looks like this kid hasn't grasped the situation quite yet. Jin-Woo inwardly clicked his tongue. It was too much of a bother to explain everything, too. Instead of an answer, he began loosening his body once more. Around the same time, Hwang Dong-suk turned around towards the boss room. The hunters following him also came to a stop. They had arrived at a far enough spot from the boss room now. At this sort of distance, there was no danger of being overheard. Hwang Dong-suk smiled deeply and signaled to Jo Gyuhwan next to him with his chin. Hey, Gyuhwana? Block up the entrance to the boss room. Should I blow it up? That's right. But don't block it up completely, okay? We gotta go in there a bit later, too. Lee Cheol-jin then asked him. Hwang Hyung, is there a reason to beat around the bush like this? Why don't we just kill them now and get started right away? Hwang Dong-suk's expression crumpled, and he glared at the other guy. There was no need for him to maintain the fake smile now. At least that was one less thing to worry about. Am I bad? Lee Cheol-jin averted his gaze in fear. Hwang Dong-suk. What if we start fighting there and the spider wakes up? How will you mine those mana stones and carry them out then? I'm sorry. Jo Gyuhwan butted in. Hwang Hyung, since we are on that subject. Wouldn't that thing wake up while we try to mine the mana stones? If so, we might end up losing big, you know. That creature was strong enough to prey on those already scary insect-type monsters. If the team got sneak attacked in the middle of the mining operation, the losses they incur would be enormous. That is why. Hwang Dong-suk smirked deeply. We're trying to offer those two up as food, aren't we? Ah? Jo Gyuhwan nodded his head as if he had finally understood the plan. Right now, no one knew just when the spider would wake up. It could be 10 hours from now, maybe 1 hour, or it could be a minute later. That was why they had to wake the spider up now and feed it. No matter how dull that monster happened to be, it'd still wake up from the impact strong enough to cause the entrance to cave in. Hwang Dong-suk continued on. We mine the mana stones when the spider goes back to sleep with a full belly. The permit they got from the association would last for 5 days. They still had over 4.5 days of leeway, in other words. They would wait, and if the spider didn't go back to sleep, they would simply dispose of it and mine as much as they could before the gate closed shut. They wouldn't be able to mine everything within the hour, but with Sung Jin-Woo and Jin-ho no longer in the picture, they should be able to avoid losing out too much. Wouldn't that be far more preferable than working under constant fear? Their safety was the #1 priority, after all. Of course, that's the worst possible scenario. If they were lucky, the profit would be divided 8 ways, they'd mine all the mana stones, and even monopolize the spider, too. As an added bonus, those expensive-looking pieces of equipment on Jin-ho's body would become theirs, too. That sword and the shield, they had to be worth at least a few 100 million won. They had nothing to lose from this transaction at all. The corners of Hwang Dong-suk's lips arched up. Block up the entrance, so we can go and take a smoke break. Quick. Yes, Hyung. Jo Gyuhwan replied as a blinding light began to gather on the tip of his fingers. Jin-ho's gaze was fixed on the sleeping spider. Even his breathing was cautious. He then asked, his expression rigid with fear. That spider be **starred, it's not gonna suddenly wake up on us, right? Who knows? Jin-Woo remained economical with his words. He had more or less figured out what would happen next, but if he said aloud all his thoughts, then Jin-ho might faint from fear. Now that I think about it. Those words were the first to come out of Jin-ho's mouth in the past 5 minutes or so. It seemed that he was really scared right now. And he used to be so talkative, too. Then, it happened. With a loud explosion, the entrance of the boss room suddenly caved in. Jin-ho hurriedly ran towards the entrance. Unfortunately for him, the entrance was completely blocked up by the fallen rocks. He pushed on with all his might, but not a single stone budged. Jin-Woo slowly walked over there in the meantime. Hyung, help me push this. Jin-ho was still giving his all to push the blockade of stones away. He said his name was Jo Gyuhwan, huh? Before the explosion, there was a flash of light. A sorcerer ranked C that controlled light. This was no doubt that be **starred's handiwork. Jin-Woo placed his hand on the fallen rocks. If I want to, I can get out of here at any time. He could sense the weight of the stones through his hands. They weren't as heavy as they looked. When he very slightly pushed, he felt the wall tremble gently. Of course, he wasn't thinking of leaving at all, anyway. Eugene-ho stopped pushing at the stones and cried out as if he had finally figured out the truth. His face now reddened in fury. Eugene-ho shifted his gaze over to Jin-Woo. Those sons of the asterisk cheese are trying to kill us. They don't want to share the mana stones, so they blocked the exit and let the spider devour us. Wow, you figured that out so quickly, Sherlock. Jin-Woo was rolling his eyes in his head but still played along for the time being. Looks that way. This is troublesome. Suddenly, Eugene-ho's reddened complexion paled in an instant. Would that be the look of someone whose blood had gone cold? No need to ask him what happened. There, the silhouette of the giant monster was oh so clearly reflected in Eugene-ho's eyes. Jin-Woo turned around. The spider's sleep had been interrupted by that loud explosion, and it was slowly raising its massive body up. The body the size of a house. Dozens upon dozens of eyes. That horrifying mouth. 8 long legs. Now that it had begun moving for real, it looked far more terrifying than when it was actually in a deep slumber. Eugene-ho leaked out a fearful gasp. His body had frozen stiff like a statue. On the other hand, Jin-Woo kept his sight firmly locked on the spider as he calmly summoned the poison fang of Kasaka from his inventory. You're mine. This was the perfect opportunity to test out his enhanced stats. The poison fang of Kasaka appeared in his right hand. As if it had always been there. Jin-Woo gripped the dagger's hilt tightly. The reason why a hunter was called a hunter. From this moment on was when the true hunt would begin. Hang on a second, Hyung. However, Eugene-ho swiftly snatched up Jin-Woo's sleeve just as the latter took a couple of steps towards the spider. What are you trying to do? Eugene-ho's hands were shaking pretty bad. Jin-Woo used his left thumb to point over his shoulder. Obviously, I'm going to hunt that. Jin-Woo had been following around Hwang Dong-suk's group until now for that purpose. In order to monopolize the remaining monsters in the dungeon as soon as Hwang Dong-suk cut the tail and ran away. This was a splendid opportunity to swallow whole all the experience points and magic crystals. Well, only if the boss hadn't devoured every monster in this dungeon, that is. If that hadn't been the case, then he would have profited a lot more, though. What a missed opportunity that was. However, Eugene-ho's facial expression clearly displayed his disbelief, as he had no idea about Jin-Woo's special constitution. What is this young rambling on about? There was something he'd heard from someone, somewhere, before. A person would stop thinking rationally the moment he or she received a mental shock beyond their capability to deal with. The hunter ranked standing right in front of him said that he'd hunt the boss of a C-rank dungeon. If this was not an act of irrationality, then what else could it be? Eugene-ho asked again, this time looking rather dumbfounded. Hyung, you want to hunt that thing? For real? Jin-Woo scratched the top of his head, looking somewhat troubled, before replying back with a question of his own. What, you want to hunt it, then? Jin-Woo turned around even before Eugene-ho had the chance to respond. There was no need to listen to his reply, anyway. Even now, Eugene-ho was barely managing to stand up straight as his legs continued to shudder. From the get-go, he didn't expect anything from Eugene-ho. Rather, he was relieved that the kid didn't follow after him while saying he'd lend his aid or some such. He'll just get in my way, anyway. Jin-Woo slowly approached the spider. The spider must have discovered the human's presence as well, as it was changing its direction towards them while shuffling on its 8 legs. It was coming closer. As if it found the never-before-seen prey rather strange, the spider didn't immediately rush out. Using its thick and long legs to push down on the ground, it inched closer and closer. As that giant monster slowly filled up his entire view, Jin-Woo's breathing became heavy. His heart began thumping faster and faster, too. Jin-Woo controlled his wayward breathing and did his absolute best to calm himself down. He had to remain focused and steady here. He recalled the exact feelings he felt when he stood at the end of the second floor of the Hapjeong Station's instant dungeon. He then recalled seeing the poison-fanged blue Kasaka for the first time. However, this giant spider in front of him didn't emit as much pressure as that snake did. Meaning, he could definitely do this. From the get-go, if he thought that this boss was impossible to clear alone, he wouldn't even have stayed here. They had gotten close enough that his face was now reflecting rather clearly on those smooth, jet-black eyes of the spider. Jin-Woo's own eyes narrowed to a slit. The exoskeleton looks pretty tough. Can my dagger even damage it? Quite obviously, a dagger would have a shorter reach than a steel longsword Jin-Woo used before. So, if he wanted to cause a deep wound, he needed to strengthen his attacks. Protagonist held the dagger in the reverse grip. He figured that it'd be easier to hurt the monster by holding the blade in this fashion. Finally, the spider stood before Protagonist. Then, it raised its 2 front legs up and bent them at an angle. What is it trying to do? His curiosity lasted only for a brief moment. Jin-Woo's eyes shot open wide next. If he didn't instinctively tilt his body out of the way, the spider's legs would have penetrated his chest just now. The spider's legs stabbed into the ground behind him before rising up in the air, its joints folding back up. And from the ends of its legs, pieces of the rocky ground fell. Protagonist sneaked a glance behind him. The stone floor now had a pretty substantial hole in it. If I got hit by that, it wouldn't have ended with me feeling a bit of ache in my chest, huh? Jin-Woo's glare sharpened even more. Now was the time he needed to concentrate even harder. It's coming. The spider's legs that initially resembled bullets being fired could now be captured in his eyes. He ducked his head lower to evade the spider's left front leg. He tilted his body back and let the spider's right leg brush past him, before he took a step closer. He evaded the spider's leg that took aim at his head once more, and took 2 steps forward this time. The spider's legs stabbed and destroyed the ground so loudly that his ears actually felt numb from the pain. Protagonist evaded the spider's attacks one by one and got closer and closer to the monster. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo couldn't quite believe his own eyes. Well, what the hell is up with this guy? Even though he was watching from afar, those attacks were so ferocious that all the hair on the back of his head was standing up. However, that man was evading them all while standing right in front of the monster, not to mention he was actually getting closer too. Seeing that efficient and calm movement, protagonist felt a chill run down his backside. And he is supposed to be an E rank? There was no freaking way. If it was him standing there and not protagonist, then he'd be torn into a rag by now. He didn't have any confidence whatsoever to dodge those attacks even once. However, protagonist was evading them without making a single mistake. An E rank doing something that a D rank hunter such as himself couldn't even dream of doing? There could only be one explanation for this. He is a fake registrant. Jin-Woo's expression hardened. Out of those highly talented hunters, there were a few who could freely control his or her magical energy. If they felt like it, they could easily fake the results and get a lower ranking. Hunters who got assigned lower ranks than what they should have got in the first place simply by hiding a portion of their magic energy, such people were labeled as fake registrants. And perhaps more alarmingly, most of those fake registrants carried around rather sinister motives for doing so. Such as, that serial killer whose hobby was to enter low-ranked dungeons and murder all the other lower-ranked hunters. As only those who were present knew what happened inside a dungeon, there was no better place to commit crimes than the world behind the gates. Jin-Woo nervously swallowed his saliva. Suddenly, protagonist seemed far scarier than the spider. And just why did I have to insist on coming to this place? Jin-Woo felt like he'd break out in sobs at any moment now. In the meantime, the spider's attacks poured down without a break. Protagonist dodged all of those attacks and grew confident of his victory. Having decreased the distance between them little by little, the head of the spider was almost within his reach now. The attack pattern of the spider was rather simple, so he could get close to it pretty easily. For now, he'll aim for its eyes. It was the basics of all basic rules to attack the monster's weak points. So, he decided to attack the eyes of the spider, which looked to be the weakest point in its defenses. As soon as I stab my dagger in those eyes. Just as protagonist made up his mind. He suddenly sensed that the spider's attacks had slowed down for some reason. Was it because his eyes had adjusted fully to the speed of its attacks? No, that wasn't it. His eyes might have been misled, but his hearing could not be fooled. The loud noises coming from the exploding ground came to him a beat slower than before, since a few seconds ago. Protagonist was already pretty confident of his rather excellent sense of hearing, so he could feel this subtle change. It was then, a certain ominous premonition flickered past in his brain. When he took a closer look, the muscles around the vicinity of the spider's mouth were trembling quite imperceptibly. Why is it trying to open its mouth now? Protagonist had been getting ready to jump up 3 meters and reach the head of the spider, but he sensed something ominous was about to happen. Protagonist hurriedly changed the direction of his jump from forward to his rear. And then, splash! From the mouth of the spider, dirty and turbid liquid spewed out. Protagonist rolled on the floor for a second before regaining his balance. He quickly took a look behind him. The spot on the floor he had been standing only until a second ago was now emitting smoke as it got scorched black. Stones on the floor melted away powerlessly. Protagonist swallowed his saliva after seeing that. If I had jumped forward just now, it wouldn't have been only the floor that was melting right now. Perhaps sensing that protagonist had been distracted, the spider rushed towards him in no time. Protagonist raised his head. By then, the spider was already right in front of his eyes. Protagonist jumped up to evade the giant spider's legs. Slam! The B******'*'*''''*s attacks had recommenced. Damn it! After that, protagonist got near the monster's head several times more. Every time he did that, though, He had no choice but to retreat in order to evade that disgusting digestive juice. When the spider's attack pattern had become 2, it became that much harder to deal with it. If he got closer after evading all those snapping legs, the digestive juice spewed out. Its legs attacked again once he had to retreat to a distance because of the juices. Shit. Feeling frustrated now, he decided to attack the legs with his dagger. Unfortunately, the legs were also covered in that thick exoskeleton, and no matter how many times he cut it, he couldn't even nick it once. Protagonist bit his lower lip. This isn't going to work. The spider only needed its 2 front legs to attack him, but on the other hand, he needed to use his entire body to evade them. It was obvious who would tire out first here. Tiredness. Tiredness, 57. As he thought, his tiredness stat was rapidly rising up. When this stat hit 70, his speed would decrease, and when it reaches 90, his breathing would become too heavy and it'd become that much harder to freely move about. He was running out of time. If I want to get closer to it, then... Speed. His speed was the issue. Wait. Speed, is it? As protagonist continued to barely evade each of the legs raining down, a thought entered his head. Yeah, I had that, didn't I? He indeed possessed a single active skill. He had forgotten all about it because there was no need for him to use it, until now. You've activated skill, dash. Your movement speed has increased by 30%. 1 mana will be spent every minute during its activation. Along with those messages, Jin-Woo's body became even faster as if a booster had been activated. Evading the spider's legs had become even easier as a result. He swiftly evaded the spider legs slamming down like lightning bolts and in the blink of an eye, arrived before the monster. Taken by surprise, the spider hurriedly spewed out its digestive juice. However, thanks to the increase in his speed, his movement had now this certain composure to it. Protagonist easily evaded the digestive juice and pounced towards the spider's head. His dagger slashed at the spider's eyes. Effect: paralysis has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Effect: bleeding has been activated. The target's stamina will decrease by 1% per second. Yes. One of the 2 special effects the poison fang of Kasaka possessed had activated successfully. The spider roared out and staggered about. Protagonist didn't miss this opening. The moment his 2 feet landed back on the ground, he jumped up again and climbed on the spider's body to get to the top of its head. The spider went crazy and swung its legs all over the place, but protagonist wasn't going to let those blind attacks land on him. Holes continued to appear on the poor, blameless ground instead. Now standing on top of the spider's head, protagonist began stabbing the eyes of the spider with his dagger. The spider rampaged around this way and that, but protagonist endured till the end and continued to shove his dagger into the head of the spider. The spider began tottering about dangerously. It was obviously getting damaged now. Seeing this, Jin-Woo's hands picked up speed. And eventually, the huge body of the spider finally tilted to the side. However, protagonist didn't stay his hand. No, he kept going at it, until the spider was dead for sure. Stab. 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 Along with the final gasps from the spider, several messages popped up in his view. You've killed the owner of this dungeon. Level up. I did it. While covered from head to toe in the spider blood, protagonist raised his hands up high. Maybe because it was a boss monster, his level jumped up by 3. Status window. From level 18, he had jumped up to reach 21 in one go. And that wasn't even the end. Besides the level up messages, something else also popped up as well. Tiering. Store, by function is now available with your level having reached 20. Oh, so I can finally spend those gold things now, eh? That was a nice message, for sure. However, now wasn't the right time to relaxedly browse through the store. Rumble. The cave began to shake just a little. With the death of the dungeon's owner, the entrance of the dungeon will be destroyed in 1 hour. Remaining time, 59 minutes 58 seconds. Indeed, he had to get out of this place before the gate closed on him, after all. Browsing through the store could be done once he was somewhere safe. Just as protagonist was about to climb down, he spotted something gleaming brightly in the middle of the spider's head. Is that an item? However, unlike the monsters from the instant dungeon, there was no message about recovered items, nor could he automatically claim them. What could it be, then? Protagonist pondered briefly before realizing what it was. Ah, these things have magic crystals, don't they? No matter how busy he was, how could he forget something so valuable like that? Protagonist extracted the magic crystal hidden deep inside the head of the dead spider. This was a C-rank magic crystal extracted from the boss monster, so it should at least go for around 10 million won easy. As the trophy for his glamorous victory, this would do very nicely. Protagonist lightly jumped down from the dead spider's head. I really hit the jackpot this time. He came to earn this month's rent, but at this rate, he'd be earning way more than that. Young Nim. When protagonist looked back, he saw Yu Jin-ho there. Please, put them in here. Yu Jin-ho then proceeded to carefully tuck in the magic crystals belonging to protagonist inside his equipment bag. Next, he reached inside the corner of the same bag and pulled out a thermos, before pouring the flask's content on its lid. Hyung Nim, you must be feeling thirsty. Please, drink this. It's water. Indeed, it was a cold, refreshing cup of water, filled right up to the edge. Why is this kid doing something no one asked him to? Since protagonist was feeling thirsty anyway, he took the thermos lid to drink the water. But, his head never stopped tilting in the meantime. Gulp. The water slid down his throat and refreshed him quite nicely. Hyung Nim, did you enjoy it? Before he had noticed it, the honorific had changed to Hyung Nim, too. Yeah, it's refreshing. Protagonist spoke his earnest opinion and handed the lid over to Yu Jin-ho. And, the things you saw in here. Even before protagonist could finish his sentence, Yu Jin-ho quickly cut in, as if to say that there's nothing to worry about. Of course. I won't say anything to anyone and take this secret with me to my grave. No, hang on. No need to take it to your grave. But, of course, I will. It'll be a promise between Hyung Nim and I, after all. Well, in that case. Okay. If you say so. You don't have to worry about a thing, Hyung Nim. It wasn't as if anyone would believe the claim that a rankie soloed the boss of a rank C gate anyway. Still, the kid was saying he'd voluntarily keep his mouth shut, and that would certainly make his life a bit easier. I thought he didn't know how to take a hint, but he's pretty quick on the uptake on things like this, eh? Is there anything else you'd like to tell me, Hyung Nim? No, not particularly. Well, that sounded a bit suspect, there. Protagonist studied the overly polite mannerism of Yu Jin-ho and inwardly questioned his motives, before coming to a conclusion of his own. Well, yeah. From Yu Jin-ho's perspective, I did save his life and all. Wasn't it the most obvious thing in the world that you'd become really courteous and humble towards a person who saved your life? When looked at that way, his attitude made more sense. The reality of the situation was slightly different from that, though. Rumble. The dungeon shook around for a bit again before its tremor stopped. That tremor was the reminder that the gate would close in a little while. The tremors would progressively get worse as time went by, and just before the gate closed, it'd morph into a full-blown earthquake. Let's get out of here. Yes, Hyung Nim. Protagonist began walking towards the entrance. Before they reached it, though, there was a sudden flash of light, and the rocks blocking up the entrance collapsed. Boom! Afterwards, Hwang Dong-suk and his goons rushed into the boss room. As soon as spotting the dead spider behind protagonist, their expressions became dumbfounded. What the hell? It's really dead. Did those two hunt it? That spider must have been nothing much, even with that big body and all. Well, if a rank D and a rank E managed to kill it, then. Hwang Hyung, what should we do now? Hwang Dong-suk scratched his chin while gazing at protagonist and Yu Jin-ho. With the spider dead, the gate would soon close. It'd be too late to start mining the mana stones now. They hadn't even finished getting ready, yet the remaining time was now less than an hour. It was time for the plan B. So, he loudly called out to Yu Jin-ho. Yu Jin-ho! Yu Jin-ho flinched and took a step back. His face was full of nervous tension. An oily smile floated up on Hwang Dong-suk's face. I thought your gear looked real eye-catching, so we did a background check on ya, and it turns out that you're a son of a real big shot. The son of the Yujin Construction's owner, Yu Myung-han, no less. So what? Well, give you a chance. I've got some stuff to discuss with your old man, you see. However, it'd get real troublesome for us if the matters of this place get out. So, if you wish to live, you better become our accomplice. An accomplice? Hwang Dong-suk pointed at protagonist with his chin. Being on the receiving end of that disgusting stare, Jin-Woo's forehead creased for a second. Kill protagonist. What? Yu Jin-ho freaked out. And Hwang Dong-suk chuckled as if he found that expression rather funny. The thing was, he used his phone to do an online search and found out that Yu Jin-ho's father was the owner of the top construction company in the country. Seeing that, a sinister scheme formed in his head. He'd filmed the scene of Yu Jin-ho killing protagonist and then, under the pretext of keeping his mouth shut, blackmail Yu Myung-han. The known wealth of Yu Myung-han is supposedly around 10 trillion won, wasn't it? Almost $9 billion. He might be able to reel in several times more money than mining these mana stones if he played his cards right. That's the only way you'll leave this place alive. As long as you kill protagonist with your own hands, we'll let you live. If not, we kill both of you. Hwang Dong-suk's eyes became very hostile right away. What are you hesitating for? No one will know what happens inside a dungeon, anyway. Wait, could it be that you're scared of a rank E, even though you're a rank D? Yu Jin-ho turned his head to his side. Protagonist shrugged his shoulders as his answer. He was implying that Yu Jin-ho should do whatever he felt like. With a determined expression, Yu Jin-ho unsheathed the sword on his hips. Finally, he made up his mind. A smile formed on Hwang Dong-suk's mouth. Unfortunately for him, his expectation was not met. Still holding that sword, Yu Jin-ho stood alongside Protagonist. So, you want to team up with that guy and fight us, is that right? Hwang Dong-suk muttered softly. A scion of a well-to-do family got lucky and killed a rank C boss, and it looked like his ego had become bloated somewhat as a result. Jo Gyuhwan whispered from the side. Hyung, what should we do now? Hwang Dong-suk lowered his voice so both Protagonist and Yu Jin-ho wouldn't be able to hear him. For now, take care of Protagonist first. We gotta hold on to that potential money bag. Our losses today are pretty substantial after all. Okay, will do. Jo Gyuhwan's hands began emitting bright light next. Seeing this, Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed to a slit. In the end, they want to have a go, huh? This would be his very first time fighting against other hunters. However, he wasn't planning to go easy on these B***stards that have aimed for his life several times already. But then, this happened. Tearing. There was that mechanical beep again. An emergency quest has been generated. An emergency quest? Protagonist raised his head. He didn't even say anything about wanting to look at the contents, yet the quest window spread out before his eyes without his consent. Now that was a first. Emergency quest, kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the player. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, a corresponding penalty will be given. The number of enemies left to kill, 8. The number of killed enemies, 0. Jin-Woo's eyes opened wider. In order to complete the quest, Hwang Dong-suk and his teammates must all die. It was then, a beam of light flashed right before his eyes. The light beams left Jo Gyuhwan's hands and flew straight at Protagonist. Boom! Flung away by the explosion, Jin-Woo's figure flew at a frightening speed and slammed into the cave wall. Slam! A portion of the wall collapsed and fell on top of Protagonist. Tumble. Hyung Nim. Yu Jin-ho froze on the spot from surprise. Don't sweat over the dead guy and why don't you come over here? Hwang Dong-suk beckoned with his fingers. Yu Jin-ho stared at the spot where Protagonist was. Just like what Hwang Dong-suk had implied, Protagonist wasn't moving an inch as he remained buried under the debris. You murderers. Tears pooled around Yu Jin-ho's eyes. Hwang Dong-suk and his Dongseng simply giggled at the label of murderers thrown at their way. Well, that was the truth, to begin with, anyway. Just how many died by their hands inside many other dungeons? While they were looking at Yu Jin-ho and continued to smile, Protagonist was under the pile of rubble, doubting his own eyes at the moment. The contents of the quest were slowly changing, that was why. There are life forms holding murderous intentions. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. A few words suddenly became illegible, before changing their shapes. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards you. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, your heart will cease functioning. What a clear-cut threat that was. If he didn't finish the quest as intended, it would kill him, instead. Kill if I don't want to be killed, is that it? The contents were pretty shocking, but Jin-Woo's fluster didn't remain for long. No, his flustered mind rapidly morphed into one of relief. Even he found it hard to believe, but that was the truth. There was this fear that always lingered in his mind, starting from the day these quests popped up in front of his eyes alongside stat values and such. What would happen to me if this mysterious phenomenon suddenly stopped? What if all these things only happened as a coincidence, and they could end at any given moment? Such fear always accompanied him. However, through this emergency quest, the truth became clear. Things happening to him were not a coincidence, nor were they some weird goodwill from someone. If the quest was generated by something holding some form of goodwill, then it should have just said overcome this danger, and not threaten him to kill him as a penalty. The system had a clear purpose. It was either make Song protagonist strong or need a strong Song protagonist. And, depending on the situation, me who could kill other hunters at the drop of a hat, even. He could glean such intentions from the system now. Protagonist felt reassured by that revelation. What a relief that, it was not a coincidence. That, it definitely had a goal. Whenever he found himself in danger, he yearned to be stronger. He so dearly wished to stop living the life where it was no different from dangling precariously on the edge of a cliff. But, on that fateful day, during the most dangerous moments of his life, his opportunity came. The goal of this system and Jin-Woo's wishes lined up perfectly. The system is using me, and I'm using the system. That was all there was to it. As long as there was an end goal, a purpose, this phenomenon would never suddenly vanish from his eyes. Protagonist slowly got up from the rubble. HP, 1360/2600. As expected of a magic spell shot by a rank C hunter, it was only a single hit, yet his HP had almost halved. There was no more room left to take it easy now. Intense malice filled up Jin-Woo's eyes. He began walking towards Hwang Dong-suk. What the heck? Hwang Dong-suk and his goons had been surrounding the scared Yu Jin-ho, so they ended up discovering protagonist rather belatedly. What's going on here? He's still alive. But, Gyu-hwan-hyung looks like a dead fish, though? What an embarrassment this is. He's a measly ranky, you know. Hwang Dong-suk scratched his chin. Hey, Gyu-hwan-ah, why didn't you finish him properly the first time? Jo Gyu-hwan's face reddened somewhat. Yeah, I should've. But, this wasn't right. He really did pour his all with that shot. He had spent over a third of his overall magical energy, yet how could this kid stand back up? Could the attack not connect properly? But then, there wouldn't have been such a loud explosion if that was the case. Lots of questions formed in his head, but there was no time to ask them. Because, protagonist opened his mouth first. Since you're playing around with people's lives. The eyes of Hwang Dong-suk's group were now fixed to protagonist. He came to a stop in front of them. Yu Jin-ho flinched in surprise, but the reactions of other hunters were rather subdued. Some of them even began smirking in derision. Protagonist spoke with a dry voice. You've all sufficiently resolved yourselves, right? Hwang Dong-suk let off a snort after hearing that. What the hell is this fool even saying? Hyung-nim, let me handle this kid. A hunter with tiny little eyes approached protagonist and placed his arms around the latter's neck. It looks like you mister hasn't really figured the situation out yet, but the thing is. The expression of the tiny eyes became weirder and weirder as he strengthened his arms. What the hell? Why can't I pull him down? He tried to perform a headlock with his physical strength, but no matter how hard he pulled, Jin-Woo's upper body showed no sign of budging. Wasn't this B***** supposed to be only a rank E? Cold sweat formed on the forehead of the tiny eyes. How could he be this strong? It happened then. Slice. The head of the tiny eyes fell to the ground. Thud. Jae-juntae. Hwang Dong-suk's eyes trembled like an earthquake. What the hell? That knife, just when did he? Where did he get that? Hwang Dong-suk and his goons quickly took several steps back and yanked their weapons out. Jin-Woo's hand was already holding the poison fang of Kasaka. Blood dripped from the tip of the blade. The number of enemies left to kill, 7. The number of killed enemies, 1. 7 left. Jin-Woo swept his gaze at Hwang Dong-suk and his group like a predator eyeing his prey. Hwang Dong-suk swallowed his saliva. He was already pretty surprised by the dagger appearing in that man's hands, but more importantly, Park Juntae's death shook him to the core rather greatly. How did an E-rank hunter kill a D rank in one hit? He had no idea what kind of a trick the other guy used, but from now on, underestimating his opponent was definitely forbidden. No, he had to be very meticulous here. Hwang Dong-suk gave a signal with his eyes to his side. Gyu-hwan-ah, hit him one more time. Jo Gyu-hwan lightly nodded his head. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistake again. Jo Gyu-hwan told himself such as lights began gathering in his hands again. But, even before the arrows of light could leave his fingertips, protagonist appeared right in front of Jo Gyu-hwan first. Jo Gyu-hwan's jaw hit the floor. The light in protagonist's eyes gleamed coldly. You first, the magic-type hunter who possesses strong firepower but a weak body. Protagonist had finished his calculations already. The dagger stabbed straight through Jo Gyu-hwan's neck. Stab. Jo Gyu-hwan tried to cover the hole in his neck and collapsed to the floor. Kill him. With that as a signal, the hunters around him rushed towards protagonist at once. Protagonist raised all his senses to the maximum and calmly focused on the movements of his enemies. All sounds disappeared and time slowed down. The agility stat and its 38 points had begun displaying its worth. He then blocked or evaded swords, spears and arrows being thrust at him from the very short distance. The eyes of the hunters became incredibly large. How can an E-rank move like this? Too fast. I can't hit him at all. The complexions of the hunters became ashen. Indeed, speed was a subjective thing. To their eyes, protagonist's movement was absurdly fast. Meanwhile, protagonist waded in among the hunters and calmly cut into their vital spots, one at a time. Effect, paralysis has been activated. Effect, bleeding has been activated. The special effects of the poison fang of Kasaka continued to activate and the hunters all fell into a quagmire of confusion. I can't move my body. Magic? Was that magic? You son of a bitch. What the hell is this guy's real identity? Screams resounded out without a break from here and there. 5 hunters surrounding protagonist all crumpled down to the floor in no time at all. Tearing. The number of enemies left to kill, 1. The number of killed enemies, 7. Protagonist shifted his gaze over to the last remaining survivor. And that was none other the big bearded man, Hwang Dong-suk. He discarded his shield as an expression of determination formed on his face. He then loudly roared out. Hwang Dong-suk kicked the ground and rushed forward. His mind raced as he ran forward. He was a tanker, and was considered one of the top even within the C rank. His opponent most likely was a damage dealer. Although that man seemed to be very agile, judged from his quick movements, there was no way he'd possess enough power to penetrate past Hwang Dong-suk's reinforcement skill. You can't fatally wound me with a measly little dagger. The one to be crushed when they collide would be Protagonist, instead. Their distance closed up in the blink of an eye, and Hwang Dong-suk tackled with his shoulder. Reinforcement! But then, his entire world seemed to spin around, and before he realized how, he was staring at the ceiling of the dungeon. Slam! His brain shook hard and a strong impact force was transmitted into his entire body. He wanted to get up, but his body didn't listen to his commands. Hwang Dong-suk tried very hard, but eventually gave up and lay sprawled on the ground. He coughed out a mouthful of blood. Did he throw me down to the floor? Did Hwang Dong-suk really lose in the contest of strength? In a battle of physical strength? How can a measly rank E? He was now so sure that something had gone terribly awry somewhere. 5 rank CS and 3 rank DS were knocked down in the blink of an eye. There was no way this B***starred was a rank E. Protagonist stood next to Hwang Dong-suk. The bearded man couldn't even properly move his body. His fate was quite obvious now. If this was a sports match or a spar, then this battle would have ended right here. Too bad for the bearded man, though. Protagonist wasn't planning to stop there. Wait a minute. Hwang Dong-suk raised his hand first. Let me go. If you want money, I'll give it to ya. As long as you spare me. 3 times. Protagonist's voice remained cold. Aren't you a bit shameless, asking to be spared by someone you tried to kill 3 times already? First, by blocking the exit of the boss room. Second, ordering Yu Jin-ho to kill him. And finally, Jo Gyu-hwan's magic. Hwang Dong-suk tried to kill Protagonist these 3 times even after excluding the battle just now. Give and take. When he returned alive from the underground temple, Protagonist resolved himself to return as much as he had received. Whether it was kindness or hostility. He'd repay the acts of ill intent with an equal amount of malice. There would be no room for negotiation. Realizing that begging for his life wouldn't work, Hwang Dong-suk's eyes shot wide open and foam bubbled around his mouth. You think you'll be okay after you laid your hands on me like this? Do you have any idea who my younger brother is? Shatter. Hwang Dong-suk could no longer continue with his words after his neck was broken. The whites of the bearded man's eyes were showing now. The number of enemies left to kill, 0. The number of killed enemies, 8. Finally, this quest had come to an end. Protagonist spat out a long sigh containing a myriad of emotions and lifted his hand away from Hwang Dong-suk's head. His gaze then stopped on his hands. He might have one-sidedly bulldozed past his opponents, but for someone who had fought to the death against 8 other people, his hands remained remarkably steady. Is it okay to be like this? Protagonist placed his hand on his chest and felt for his beating heart. His heart was beating as calmly as if he had been taking a stroll. What if? For the first time ever, he began to think that, seeing the system wasn't the only change taking place within him after he returned alive from the underground temple. However, his musings had to be kept brief. Soon, the familiar beep entered his head. You have completed emergency quest, kill all the enemies. Completion rewards are now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Y/N. He was half expecting this to happen, and sure enough, he now had received rewards. Protagonist didn't even hesitate and chose yes. Confirm. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. 10 additional stat points. Reward 3. Skill, Intimidation. Not only 10 points, but even a skill, too? Protagonist's eyes widened from the huge amount of available rewards. All those stat points were one thing, but this new skill stole away almost all of his attention. If I didn't possess the dash skill when fighting that spider. The only reason why he managed to hunt the boss down was because of dash. There was no need to mention how important a skill was during a battle. It was not for nothing that a rune stone, with which a person could learn a brand new skill, cost several hundreds of millions of won. Protagonist immediately checked this skill called Intimidation out. Show me the third reward. Skill, Intimidation LV1. Active skill. Mana required to activate, 100. Can render a designated target in a state of fear for 1 minute by using your powerful aura. Multiple targets can be selected. Affect fear, all stats minus 50%. Although it was only active for a short time, it was still a rare skill that could decrease the opponent's stats by a substantial amount. Of course, exactly like other effects, if the opponent's resistance was high enough it would fail to activate. But, if it did work, then protagonist thought that taking care of his enemies, regardless of who it was, would become as easy as pie. And since it could be used against multiple opponents, the scope of this skill's usefulness seemed limitless, too. It's really good, isn't it? The rewards were just as good as the potential penalty was as bad. Hang on a sec. Now that I think about it, it's not like that, is it? After all, his life was at stake here. And, was that all? Protagonist took a look around him. He frowned deeply after taking in the gruesome sight. He had witnessed enough deaths of other hunters, but even then, he'd never really get used to looking at the corpses of other people. This was what this quest asked of him, though. But, for a quest that asked for many lives as its completion requirement, the rewards handed out felt rather cheap and not quite enough. Well, even if it weren't for the quest, he'd still have to fight against Hwang Dong-suk and his crew in the end, but still. And they say, a man's greed knows no bounds. Protagonist shook his head wryly. It was then, the cave shook around once more. Rumble. The tremor had become stronger than before. It was now the time to get out of the dungeon. But, before he could do that, there was something else he needed to take care of first. And that happened to be Eugene-ho. Protagonist's gaze drifted toward him. Eugene-ho had been pitifully frozen solid in his spot until then, and flinched rather grandly before hurriedly lowering his gaze to the ground. Now, what should I do with this kid? Of course, he wasn't thinking of harming Eugene-ho. There was no need to, nor was there a reason to do so, either. However, if the events of this place got leaked out to the rest of the world, then there was a good chance that his life would become inconvenienced in a variety of ways. So, I guess I should make sure he doesn't talk, huh? Just as he thought that course of action would be for the best, Eugene-ho rapidly ran towards him, knelt down, and bowed his head. Hyungnim, please spare me. Suddenly, protagonist felt that the following conversation should unfold a lot more smoothly than his initial expectation. Eugene-ho was shaking like a wet dog. His complexion was pale, as well. Well, 8 people died in the blink of an eye right in front of his face, so that was par for the course, really. One of the most important tools in dealing with people was the fear. So, protagonist decided to use the situation to his advantage. Why should I? Hyungnim, if you spare me, then I'll hand over all the profit earned in this dungeon to you. As expected, protagonist immediately displayed his interest. Please, think about it, Hyungnim. If you monopolize the profit meant for 10 people after 9 others are killed, others would definitely start questioning you. From Eugene-ho's perspective, protagonist was, without a doubt, a fake registrant. Not only that, a highly skilled fake registrant who enjoyed murdering people. Obviously, he'd not want the attention of other folks landing on him. So what? On the flip side, if we both walk out of here alive, then according to the contract, all the magic crystals from this dungeon belongs to me. Even if all the other teammates had died, since you don't get a share in the first place, no one would suspect you. Of course, there was no way that Eugene-ho would be suspected of foul play here. Well, his father owned one of the country's top-ranked companies, after all. 3 days passed by since the incident of the C-ranked gate. Gina came home early from school as it was Saturday today. As soon as entering the apartment, she began sniffing the air and hurriedly removed her shoes. Appa? What's going on here? Did you order fried chicken? Yeah, I ordered some takeaway to make sure it'd get here just in time for you. Wow, really? Jin-Woo beckoned her while sitting by the dining table, causing Gina's eyes to open wider. She immediately ran towards him. What's going on here? And you're a serial Scrooge, too? Did something good happen lately? Of course, there was. The family's bank balance had swelled up from 800,000 won all the way to 180,300,000 earlier today. 180 million was from the sale of the magic crystals, and 500 grand was used for the month's rent. Still, 180 million. Just one raid and he was able to get his hands on an absurd amount of money, totaling 180 million. Just as Gina had implied with her question, the chicken and beer meal was to celebrate the big earnings sitting pretty in the family bank account right at this moment. Thank you for this meal. Gina sneakily reached towards the beer can, but then, Jin-Woo's finger powerfully flicked her forehead. For you, this. He then placed a can of cola in front of her. I was only joking, you know. Not minding Gina and her hands busy rubbing her reddened forehead, protagonist popped the lid open on the refreshingly cold can of beer and poured the contents down his throat. But then, this happened. Tearing. Protagonist couldn't help but react nervously when he heard the familiar beep. Why a system message, all of a sudden? Harmful substances have been detected. Effects of buff, detox will now commence. 3, 2, 1. Detoxification has been completed. You detoxed harmful substances? Are you talking about alcohol? Protagonist drank up the remaining beer in the can, and popped open another just to make sure. And the exact same messages appeared again. He had drank up 2 cans of beer in one go, but he couldn't feel one hint of drunkenness come over. Whatever this buff thing was, it was definitely working as intended. What's this? Protagonist tilted his head. When protagonist's expression became serious, Gina asked him with a worried voice. Nah, it's just that I remembered something pretty urgent, that's all. Eat without me while I take care of this, okay? Protagonist headed back into his room. He then began rummaging through every nook and cranny of his memories, trying to figure out if he had missed anything, even if it was small. Suddenly, he recalled something. Every quest has rewards, even penalty quests. But, there was one quest that I never got around to confirming the rewards, no? Jin-Woo hurriedly opened the mailbox. At the time, he had no clue what the system was nor what rewards could mean, so glossed over them, but he definitely remembered reading the message that said he had met the conditions to clear the quest. His heart began beating faster and faster. Jin-Woo eventually discovered the messages sitting right at the bottom of the mailbox. Congratulations on becoming a player. Read. Jin-Woo's voice trembled as he spoke softly. Confirm. This system will support the growth of the player. Failing to comply with the system's instructions will result in potential penalties. Your rewards have been delivered. As he thought. There was the mention of rewards. The voice he heard back inside the underground temple clearly said these words. Completion requirements for the secret quest, the courage of the powerless has been met. A secret quest or not, it was still a quest, wasn't it? However, he hadn't checked what kind of rewards he had received until now. Back then, he thought that it was all a hallucination, didn't he? Will result in potential penalties. Would you like to confirm your rewards? Y/N. Yes. Rewards for the secret quest, the courage of the powerless. The blessings from the Grand Sorcerer, Candiaru. The Grand Sorcerer Candiaru has been deeply moved by your courage, and has gifted you with a special spell. When accompanied by the blessings of Candiaru, you'll get to enjoy a healthy and fulfilling life every day. Let there be a bright future laying in wait for the challenger. One-time effect will to recover, all your damaged body parts will be recovered to their original state. Continuous effect good health and long life, you'll be immune to all types of diseases, poisonous substances, as well as all forms of status debuffs. During sleep, your recovery rate will increase exponentially. Only now puzzle pieces fell to their places. Hang on. I'm immune to all types of poison, too? Protagonist's eyes abruptly shot open real wide. If that was the case, then could it be? Protagonist hurriedly extracted a certain item out from his inventory. Item, poison sac of Kasaka. Rarity, A. Type, medicine. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasaka. Can be found very rarely when hunting Kasakas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles. Affect the iron scales of Kasaka, 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect damaged muscles, strength -35. My muscles are supposed to get damaged because of the toxin, but wouldn't this detox buff resist that? There was only one way to find out. Protagonist squeezed his eyes shut and drank the liquid contained within the pouch. Sticky, yucky liquid slid down his throat. The taste was oily and terrible, but he endured it. And they say what's good for you usually tastes bitter. When he finished drinking all of the poisoned liquid, messages popped up in his view. Harmful substances have been detected. Side effect damaged muscles has been nullified. Yes. Protagonist clenched his fists real tightly. Still, he couldn't celebrate just yet, so he quickly summoned his status window. Available points to distribute, 0. Reduction in physical damage, 20%. As he expected, there was no decrease in his strength stat. It still remained as 53 points, and then, he saw the new stat called reduction in physical damage, 2. Sure, it might be limited in the category, but it still was a marvelous stat that reduced all physical damage by 20%. Nice. Just as protagonist began celebrating the emergence of this new stat, Gina called out to him from the living room. Appa? You know a guy called Eugene-ho? He's looking for you. No way, he can't be the same Eugene-ho. Protagonist quickly went to the living room and snatched the phone's receiver off his little sister. Hello? Hyung-nim, it's me. Eugene-ho. Really now? The voice coming from the other side sounded way too familiar. How did you get this number? There was a person I know working for the association, you see. You didn't want to answer your smartphone, so I had no choice but to call you at home like this. Details only. Ah. Oops, my bad, Hyung-nim. But, it's not something we can discuss over the phone. May we meet up somewhere so I can tell you in person? Protagonist tilted his head slightly. He still wants to meet me after going through such an ordeal? Hyungnim, I really gotta ask you for this favor. Please. What a weird kid this guy was. Protagonist eventually agreed to spare 1 hour after Yoo Jin-ho earnestly pleaded with him. The meeting place was a franchise cafe located not too far from Protagonist's home. Even though it was a weekday, there were quite a few people inside the cafe, perhaps because they chose to meet right after the lunch hour. Hyungnim, over here. Yoo Jin-ho greeted him rather enthusiastically. Before entering the cafe, Protagonist focused his perception to the max, but he couldn't sense any other hunters inside the shop. At the bare minimum, this meeting wasn't for the purpose of revenge, it seemed. Although Protagonist couldn't really remember doing anything that warranted such an ill will towards him and requiring a swift retribution. Protagonist sat down on the other side of the table. Didn't think we'd meet again. There was a half-eaten ice cream on top of the table belonging to Yoo Jin-ho. Yoo Jin-ho spoke as he stood up. What would you like to order? Should I go and get you some coffee? No, it's fine. Yoo Jin-ho looked a bit crestfallen for some reason as he sat back down. Protagonist opened his mouth first. So, what do you want? It was then. I'm telling you, this guy did it for real back then. It was so crazy, really. Why did you ask me for a meeting? Well, that. Hyungnim. I gave this matter a lot of thought. I mean, lots and lots of thought, you know? But, I think I really, seriously, must ask you. What are you talking about now? Hyungnim, actually. Yoo Jin-ho's face reddened as if he was embarrassed about something, before he summoned up his courage and spoke up. Actually, I was thinking of forming my own tea. Protagonist didn't even hesitate 1 second and replied. I'm not interested. Yoo Jin-ho's expression became dumbfounded. Already, Hyungnim? I don't need to hear the rest to figure it out. Jin-Woo was quite decisive in saying no. This wasn't because he didn't like Yoo Jin-ho or something like that. Although he seemed a bit off in the head, his attitude remained courteous and he came across as someone who'd always keep his word. He was quite different from other wealthy families, often seen in mass media. However, Jin-Woo was not interested in becoming a playmate of the son of a wealthy family during the boy's hunter phase. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. Hyungnim. Just as Jin-Woo got up to leave, Yoo Jin-ho hurriedly reached out and held on to him. Hyungnim, only for 20. No, wait, please partner up with me for the next 19 times. For what? To clear dungeons? Yes. I'll definitely compensate you properly. Yoo Jin-ho's voice sounded rather desperate. Jin-Woo tilted his head slightly. There were 2 reasons why people became hunters. Either it was for money, or for their sense of duty. But, Yoo Jin-ho didn't belong to either camp. Maybe, it was possible that he thought of being a hunter was a slightly more dangerous form of extreme sports or some such. That was what Jin-Woo had been believing until now. True, he was taken aback slightly when the kid declared that he wanted to form his own private raid team, even after going through that ordeal the last time. There are all sorts of people in this world, that's for sure. It wouldn't be too strange to find a scion of a wealthy family who had become numb to the safe environment he had grown up in. However, Yoo Jin-ho's expression seemed far too serious and determined at the moment for that kind of an explanation. Could there be a different reason? Rather than the promise of proper compensation, Jin-Woo's curiosity was being tugged by the idea of raiding dungeons 19 more times. Jin-Woo's brain quickly kicked into gear. Hang on. Let's say that last time was his first raid. And when he completes 19 more raids, then. Could this kid be aiming for? It didn't take long for Jin-Woo to realize the truth. His expression became dumbfounded, instead. Are you perhaps thinking of getting the guild master license? That's correct, Hyungnim. What a smart decision it was not to order coffee. Otherwise, he might have sprayed the bitter liquid all over the table by now while trying to drink it. You want to become a guild master? Well, the story's a bit complicated there, Hyungnim. Yoo Jin-ho's face reddened considerably compared to before as he spoke. Hyungnim. Please listen to my story. Jin-Woo was in a slight dilemma, wondering what he should do now, but in the end, he was defeated by his curiosity, so he sat back down. Fine, I'll listen. Well, the promised hour had not ended yet, so there was that, too. It wouldn't be a problem to listen to the kid's story anyways. Yoo Jin-ho hurriedly parked his butt back down as well. As you've correctly guessed, I want to acquire the guild master license. Acquiring that license was not that difficult, actually. You had to be a hunter who participated in at least 20 raids. As long as you met this base requirement, all you had to do was to pass a written test and you'd get the license. Of course, nobody would join the guild created by a rubbish hunter, and if a guild failed to maintain the minimum number of members, it'd be disbanded as well. Yoo Jin-ho continued on. It's not public knowledge yet, but actually, my father is trying to establish a guild of his own. A guild created by Yujin Construction? Yes. Yujin Construction was one of the biggest corporations in South Korea. It had expanded its business well beyond the fields of construction and into other sectors and had been making a killing there. Jin-Woo had heard that recently, they reaped huge profit after jumping into the hunter-related businesses as well. And they want to form a guild of their own? When Jin-Woo displayed a hint of interest, Jin-Ho became excited and added more explanations. Head scout strong hunters and build a massive guild, and place all our hunter-related business interests under it. That's his plan. If a corporation wished to partake in hunter-related businesses, then it was a necessity to work together with a guild. Well, you'd need the strength of a large guild if you ever wanted to get your hands on magic crystals and remains of the monsters, or treasures such as mana stones found in gates ranked A or B. And so, you wish to become a self-sustaining entity. Is that it? That is absolutely correct, Hyung-nim. With the financial wherewithal of Yujin Construction, creating a guild wouldn't even pose a problem. No, the real issue would be with just who gets to run it. My father is thinking of hiring an S-ranked hunter as the guild master and placing my older brother as the vice master, and run the guild that way, but... Jin-Woo immediately caught onto what Jin-Woo was implying here. If things were done that way, then a source of worry would be created along the way. The power of authority the guild master wielded was simply far too great. Even if it was the vice master who had hired the master, in case of a conflict arising between the two, there was a very good chance that the latter would end up completely overtaking the entire guild. In order to prevent that, there was only one way. All you had to do was to hire a master who'd never ever betray the one who hired him or her. For instance, brothers or even a son. And the chairman of Yujin Construction, Yu Myung-hwan, had a son called Jin-Ho. However, my older brother's business experience is far too good for me to simply take over the position of the guild master. It was his idea to enter the field of hunter-related business, you see. We gained huge profit in that sector because of him. His older brother had become a successful entrepreneur by the age of 31. Compared to him, Jin-Ho was only a 22-year-old university student, even if he possessed a unique plus point of being a rank D hunter. Naturally, the chairman was thinking of entrusting the guild over to the eldest son. The eldest couldn't become a master since he was not a hunter, but he still knew a lot about the hunter-related businesses, and also managed to achieve great success in the sector, too. Meaning, even if there was an element of a risk, the chairman would still take the chance. And you wish to change your father's mind by acquiring the master license, yeah? That's right, Hyung-nim. And so, Jin-Woo figured out why Jin-Ho was here, trying desperately to reel him in. Even if the kid hired a high-ranked hunter and acquired the license that way, it'd be no different from buying it with cash. However, what if the kid succeeded in 20 raids with low-ranked hunters, such as Jin-Woo, and acquired the license that way? Jin-Ho would be able to persuade his father. Simply him being able to lead a group of hunters would be enough to get his approval. That was what Jin-Ho was counting on. If Jin-Ho became the guild master, they would get an S rank as the vice master and scout all the talented hunters. Well, others would only feel secure and join them if one or both master and vice master spots were filled by someone with powerful abilities. If this plan were to come to fruition, then completing those 20 raids was an absolute must. Hyung-nim, please help me. I have no one but you, Hyung-nim. Jin-Ho bowed his head. If it weren't for Jin-Woo, the kid would have died during his very first raid. By the giant spider, or at the hands of Hwang Dong-suk. 2 times. Jin-Ho needed a trustworthy ally here. I can definitely trust Hyung-Nim. He might be a cold-hearted person who would not bat an eyelid when killing his enemies, but he also happened to be a righteous man who'd not treat lightly the lives of those weaker than him, and just as important, he didn't care about getting his hands on ill-gotten gains, as well. Jin-Woo was the perfect candidate. However, Jin-Woo didn't need Jin-Ho. That was why he asked the kid. What would I get in return, then? Jin-Ho raised his head, his expression one of joy, as he quickly produced an envelope he had prepared earlier on. And a blueprint of a building came out from there. Jin-Woo took a look at it. This is the guild office building we're constructing at the moment. The expected retail price of the building is around 30 billion, but it will definitely rise up in the future. Although the association was doing their best to manage them, there would always be that fear of monsters escaping from the dungeons. That was why the land price near the association headquarters or around large guilds always rose up higher as time went by. Well, there would be no more precious wealth than one's own life, after all. Even if it was a small guild, being near one almost guaranteed your safety. However, if it was a building occupied by a large guild, there was no need to mention it. If I become the master, then for exactly 1 year, you'll use it until the guild has been stabilized. and then, hand over the deeds to you, Hyung Nim. Of course, I'll make sure all the paperwork are in order so there wouldn't be any unnecessary complications later down the line. A 30 billion building, for raiding rank C gates 19 more times. Jin-Woo smirked slightly. As long as you become the master, it'll all be worth it, is that right? That's correct, Hyung Nim. On that fateful day, Jin-Ho got to learn the valuable lesson of anything goes inside a dungeon. Hiring any old hunters could lead to him getting killed. On the flip side, hiring famous hunters would mean Jin-Ho would lose the ability to persuade his father. However, Jin-Woo was different. He was nominally a ranky hunter, yet he was strong enough to solo a C-ranked boss, as well as 8 C-ranked hunters without getting hurt. Hyung Nim could be at least a B-ranked. Or, someone far stronger than that. With Jin-Woo was around, raiding 19 C-rank gates would not pose any problems at all. So, yes, if he could become the guild master, 30 billion sounded rather cheap in comparison. The only thing remaining was Jin-Woo agreeing to do so. He wouldn't say no with this sort of terms on offer, right? Jin-Ho nervously studied Jin-Woo's reactions. What should I do? In the meantime, Jin-Woo was in a serious dilemma. 30 billion won. That was a huge amount of money. If one considered the fact that the winning prize of the local lottery was 1.5 billion won, he'd have to get lucky 20 times in a row to earn that amount. Not only that, the value of the building would only continue to rise up. If it were any other normal hunter, they would jump in with both feet and sign up right away. That's how tempting this offer was. However, Jin-Woo was as far removed from being normal as anyone could ever hope to get. The one and only under the heavens, he was the only hunter who could grow stronger. If he continued on with quests and leveled up over and over again, he reached the S rank sooner or later, or even something surpassing that. If I can surpass the S rank, then 30 billion would be nothing. The contract fee for S rank hunters went for several dozen billions already. No matter how famous a celebrity or a sports star was, they would never even come close to the worth of an S-ranked hunter. This was the era where the number of high-ranked hunters signified the strength of a nation. As a result, the treatment S ranks received exceeded one's imaginations. Considering that, what Jin-Woo needed to prioritize here was not money, but his growth. And in order to grow, it'd be more convenient to be alone. Yeah, it'd be better to minimize the risks of unexpected events. If he hunted along with other people, the experience points received could decrease too, and because of all those eyes watching him, making a move would become rather cumbersome as well. Not to forget, in order to avoid anything troublesome happening down the line, he had to threaten Jin-Ho back then, something he didn't want to do in the first place. And finally, he'd have to match his schedule to that of the assault team from now on. The efficiency of his growth would only decrease, one way or the other. I can always make money later on. Although it was unfortunate, he had to decline this offer. Just as he thought like this. Hang on a sec. Suddenly, he came up with a pretty good way to catch 2 birds called money and growth with a single stone. If it's in this manner. When he finally raised his head, he spotted Jin-Ho and his nervous face. Jin-Woo slowly opened his mouth. I only have one condition. Jin-Ho's expression brightened up instantly. Whatever it is, please tell me, Hyung Nim. I wonder, would you be able to smile even after I told you what it is? Jin-Woo smiled inwardly and spoke up. You and I. Only 2 of us will enter the dungeons. Pardon? Jin-Ho gasped out in pure shock. Hiyo Hyung Nim. If I didn't make a mistake here, then. Are you saying that Hyung Nim and I, just us 2, will clear C-ranked gates? Only us 2? You didn't make a mistake, then. Sure, protagonist was able to defeat the spider boss all by himself, so he'd be able to do something similar to other bosses as well. But, when imagining only the 2 of them against the horde of monsters, just like back in that dungeon's entrance with those insects, Jin-Ho suddenly found himself unable to breathe. Jin-Ho became completely speechless, while protagonist formed an expression that said, I knew it. However, this is the best way. The best, in order to catch both birds. It'd be very hard to enter any freelancer-run raid teams as a hunter ranked E. From the very first day he made up his mind to start making money in this profession, he was constantly reminded of this harsh reality. But, Hyung Nim. You need at least 10 people if we want to enter AC rank. I'm pretty sure you'd find plenty of willing people when you say you'd pay them just for showing up to fill up the head count. Time to put to good use what he had learned from Hwang Dong-suk, then. If there were hunters who didn't want to fight with their lives on the line, but were in urgent need of cash, they would surely jump in with both feet at this golden opportunity. Jin-Ho's expression became one of a scared cat, though. Wait. Surely, you are not suggesting that us 2 will kill every single monster inside a dungeon, all the way up to the boss, are you? In truth, it'd be only one person doing that, though. You got it. With this arrangement, protagonist would be able to prevent the potential worst-case scenario of someone stealing his experience points, and the only person next to him would be Jin-Woo, so he wouldn't even need to worry about other people watching him all the time as well. If it's like that, then he'll get to enjoy some serious power leveling, won't I? On top of that, after all the raids were done and dusted, he get a nice little bonus of a wonderful building rolling right onto his lap. The only thing remaining now was him persuading Jin-Woo. And as expected, Jin-Woo was very, very scared at the moment. Isn't that way too dangerous, Hyung-nim? You're only looking at it from one way and not the other. Eh? Protagonist beckoned the kid to come closer, so Jin-Woo leaned forward. If no one else participates in hunting besides us, doesn't that also mean no one will get hurt, as long as we're okay? Oh, of course. For the first raid, you were like a third wheel being dragged along, so you couldn't do anything about the incident that had happened, but think about for the moment the ramifications of your own raid team finishing up all 19 raids without a single casualty. Jin-Woo's eyes shot open right up. If that was the case, then persuading his father would become one level easier. Not only he'd be a D-rank hunter, but the record of being the leader of a team that successfully performed 19 raids without a single incident would be added on top as well. It'd be the definite proof of him being qualified to become the guild master. Nothing would be a better advertisement for himself than this, wouldn't it? Protagonist studied Jin-Woo's expression and smiled in satisfaction. This kid has convinced now. From the word go, the person in need was Jin-Woo. As for protagonist, he didn't really need to go on a raid with Jin-Woo, but still could enter dungeons via the association giving him a call, or through the random boxes. Jin-Woo was thinking now. Although it was a bit scary, if he succeeded in pulling this off, then just as protagonist had implied, there would be so much he'd get in return. When recalling the sight of protagonist displaying his absolutely overwhelming might in battles from last time, Jin-Woo realized that maybe, there wasn't much to be afraid over at all. Jin-Woo finally made his mind up, albeit after some serious internal struggle. Well, do it your way, Hyung-Nim. In that case, I'll search for suitable teammates. Very good. Protagonist nodded his head. They had come to an understanding. Since he was still in front of protagonist, Jin-Woo stopped feeling nervous and tight-chested, and displayed a bright smile. I've managed to finally get Hyung-Nim on my side. For some reason, he was not feeling too scared of the upcoming raids. A trustworthy comrade named Sung Jin-Woo had joined him, and it'd be a bit easier to form a raid team now, too. As protagonist had said, with the terms on offer, many would queue up in line just for a chance to participate. With this, I'm one step closer to becoming the master. Protagonist also smiled brightly as well. Clean up as many C-rank dungeons by myself, and level up as quickly as possible. The two men exited the cafe with satisfied expressions. After going their separate ways, protagonist ran back home. Protagonist is standing in between some quiet alley holding dagger in his hand. Item, Key of the Demon's Castle. Rarity, S. Category, Key. A key that will let you enter the dungeon, Demon's Castle. Can be used at the Daesung Tower located in Songpagu, Seoul. It's an S? Jin-Woo raised his voice in surprise. Of course, there was no guarantee that the rarity ranking had any bearings on the difficulty of the dungeon. But, he couldn't think of it any other way. The rarity E key opened a dungeon that was on par with a gate ranked E, after all. What would he do if the difficulty of the instant dungeon turned out to be S, then? Even with a raid team consisting solely of S-ranked hunters, there was no definite guarantee that such a dungeon would be cleared. The odds were around 50-50? The difficulty of a gate exploded upwards past the rank B, and even when looking through the entire world, there had been too few cases of S-rank gates opening up in the world. One of them appeared on Jeju Island, though. Afterwards, the island of Jeju became an abandoned hellhole where no humans could exist. Jin-Woo stared at the key in his hand for a long while. This is what I really wanted? If there was one silver lining to be found here, then that would be the explanation saying he'd be able to enter the dungeon with this key, unlike the previous one which said he'd be transferred instead. The implication being that he could escape at any time if he felt like it. Even if the key suddenly vanished from him, he still had the return stone from the last dungeon waiting to be used inside his inventory as well. He was no longer worried about getting trapped behind an invisible wall like the last time. I've worked hard to earn this chance, so I can't throw it away like that now, can I? He simply had to confirm right away with his own two eyes whether this was what he really wanted or not. In front of the Daesung Tower, a super tall skyscraper over 100 floors tall was standing straight as if to pierce the heavens above. Indeed, this was what the modern skyscraper should look like. Just looking up at it made him feel extremely dizzy. There were only a few people walking around as it was already late evening now. The streets with not one soul on it gave off an eerie vibe. Still, I can't be sure, so? Jin-Woo took a good look around him, before pulling up the hood attached to his top to hide his face. If someone saw a person disappearing and appearing again in thin air without a gate around, that might cause a bit of ruckus. Not only that, there were several CCTV cameras installed here and there in the near vicinity, so it wasn't such a bad idea to avoid being too conspicuous. Jin-Woo used the key and entered the gate. It's connected to the outside world. Unlike the last time, there was no invisible wall blocking his exit. The key also didn't disappear and remained tucked inside his pocket. If he wanted to, he could get out of here at any time, in other words. Now that I'm finished with confirming the escape route. Since he didn't know whether the rarity of the key equated to the difficulty of the dungeon, he was far more cautious than usual. Jin-Woo pulled the hood back and took a look behind him. It was a sight shocking enough to make him groan. Just now, when he was taking a few steps towards the Daesung Tower, the world in front of his eyes transformed in an instant. Could this place even be called a dungeon anymore? A completely different world was waiting for him. Instead of the vanished Daesung Tower, a massive tower-like structure stood there. Wait, is that really a tower, or should I call it a castle, instead? A tower rising up high into the air without an end, wrapped in reddish-black flames. It was as if the tower wasn't burning, but it was spewing out billowing flames, instead. A burning tower, huh? Rather than the name of Demon's Castle, maybe that nickname suited it better. Jin-Woo slowly walked towards this burning tower. Crackle. Pop. The closer he got, the louder the noises of flames rampaging around grew. Can I even enter this thing in the first place? However, even if he did, there was yet another problem to consider. Just like the last instant dungeon that was based off on the subway station, there was a good chance that, since this dungeon was based off on the Daesung Tower, he'd have to climb up 100 floors to clear it completely. He couldn't even begin to imagine just how long that would take. Jin-Woo's steps came to a halt. He sensed a strong aura near the entrance. He slowly surveyed the surroundings and spotted a black life form the size of a bull huddled in slumber right in front of the doorway. Jin-Woo carefully summoned the Poison Fang of Kasaka. T-ring. Item, Poison Fang of Kasaka. Rarity, C. Type, Dagger. Attack plus 25. A dagger fashioned from the Poison Fang of the Kasaka. There are traces of the Kasaka's poison on it, so when attacking, it will cause paralysis and bleeding status effects. Can be stored in the inventory, or can be sold at the store. Status effect paralysis, the target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect bleeding, the target's stamina will be reduced by 1% per second. Its attack power wasn't all that high, but the greatness of its added effects was proven in real battles time and time again. It'd be nice if the paralysis works and I get to kill it easily. Jin-Woo walked as quietly as possible while approaching that creature. However, it was impossible to fool the olfactory senses of a monster. Soon enough, the creature sniffed the air and raised its body up. Jin-Woo clicked his tongue. The creature stood up completely and all three of its heads turned in Jin-Woo's direction. Hell's Gatekeeper, Cerberus. It was a huge dog possessing 3 heads. The name written in red letters floating on top of its heads immediately drew his attention. It was proof that the monster's level was very high. Since it's red, does that mean it's around the same level as those centipedes from the penalty zone? Back then, he managed to barely run away from the centipedes. Well, he was only a level 1 back then, so it couldn't be helped. But, it's different this time. He had grown stronger quite quickly during the short space of time. Without a doubt, that black creature was strong, but still, it didn't come across as truly overwhelming. His enhanced, alert perception was telling him that he could do this. It wasn't for nothing that he raised his perception stat. He kept on investing points to this stat so he could easily tell whether he should fight or take flight in cases like this. Growl. The Cerberus sensed the enemy and bared its fangs to threaten him. Jin-Woo's gaze then wandered off to the creature's tail. It kind of resembled a whip, and its end was enveloped in flames as well. Jin-Woo's eyes sharpened in an instant. Fangs and a tail. At the bare minimum, 2 methods of attack, huh? Jin-Woo swallowed his dry saliva. The Cerberus slowly closed the distance before stopping right in front of him and began studying him for some reason. Is it looking for an opening? Just as he thought that, the monster attacked him. Roar. Jin-Woo's eyes opened much, much wider. Too fast. Jin-Woo barely evaded the Cerberus fangs by sliding underneath the leaping monster. The Cerberus landed back on the ground and spun around, before began biting at him with its 3 heads. Woof. Bark. Roar. The sharp fangs gleamed coldly in between the biting snouts. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves buff effect has activated. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. He sensed his body getting lighter. Nice. Jin-Woo quickly retreated and wielded his dagger at the Cerberus as it continued to stick close to him. The dagger collided with the fangs and issued loud noises. The blade moved at a blinding pace, yet all he could do at the moment was to deflect the Cerberus attacks and nothing else. Even after I buffed up, it's still this strong. The Cerberus' agility had easily exceeded his imaginations. In order to overturn this situation, Jin-Woo activated his intimidation skill. Intimidation has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Jin-Woo's eyes widened. It didn't work. It was at that moment that the long tail of Cerberus flew in like a whip. Jin-Woo reflexively ducked his head lower and evaded the tail. But that caused his legs to stop moving for a second. And the monster didn't miss this opportunity. One of its heads powerfully bit into Jin-Woo's left shoulder. Jin-Woo summoned all of his strength and stabbed the dagger into the middle of the biting head. Stab. Effect, paralysis has been activated. Effect, bleeding has been activated. Whimper. The Cerberus cried out and let go of him. Thankfully, he was able to minimize the damage done before other heads had the chance to join in on the attack, but his left shoulder was now in tatters. What a scary biting power that was. He tried to move his left arm, but it didn't want to budge. Jin-Woo's expression crumpled unsightly. He managed to wound the Cerberus, but when comparing the severity of their injuries, then it was clear that he came off far worse in that exchange. If either of paralysis or bleeding worked, the situation would have been different by now. Jin-Woo glared at the Cerberus and clicked his tongue. Then, something else happened. Huh? The eyes of the Cerberus were being dyed in a crimson color all of a sudden. Gruel. Inexplicably, Jin-Woo sensed something ominous was about to happen. What could it be? Hell's Gatekeeper Cerberus is using skill, Rage. Its state of rage will persist for the next 3 minutes. All of Cerberus stats will be increased by 100%. Cerberus will no longer feel pain. Jin-Woo cried out. What did you just say? A monster just used a skill. In that instant, the Cerberus leaped off the ground. F***ck. Even before he could react, the Cerberus appeared right before his eyes. He hurriedly swung his dagger, but it only managed to graze the side of one of its heads. And all 3 heads bit into Jin-Woo simultaneously. Jin-Woo gritted his teeth. His neck, waist, and thigh all got bitten. The Cerberus ran at its top speed and slammed Jin-Woo against the castle's gate. Slam! Jin-Woo's HP hit the rock bottom in an instant. HP, for 11/3-602. Your HP has decreased below 30% and skill, Tenacity has been activated. All damage received will be reduced by 50%. Thanks to the damage reduction and the Tenacity passive, he was able to avoid getting killed in one hit. Jin-Woo's eyebrows shot up in anger. It'd be easy to go mad from pain and wildly thrash about, but he'd lose this great opportunity, which would most likely never happen again. Losing his consciousness now would mean his end. Jin-Woo had been bitterly waiting for the end of the 3-minute duration and finally, revealed his hidden trump card. The first reward, give it to me now. He immediately collected the first reward from the daily quest he had saved up until now. Reward 1, full recovery of the current physical condition has been applied. A blue light enveloped him and all depleted health reverted back to full. HP, 3602/3602. Even his tattered left arm was healed as good as new in the blink of an eye. This is my chance. Jin-Woo's eyes gleamed coldly. In such close proximity, no matter how agile this monster was, it'd not be able to dodge his attacks. Jin-Woo rapidly caught one of Cerberus' necks with his left arm, and stabbed the poison fang of Kasaka in the middle of that neck. Stab. 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 The rage state had ended by now, and the Cerberus began to violently thrash about trying to escape from Jin-Woo's embrace. However, Jin-Woo did not let go and held on with his powerful arms. The harder the Cerberus struggled, the stronger he gripped the neck of the monster. In the meantime, his dagger continued to stab into the creature's neck. Stab, stab, stab. The Cerberus bit into Jin-Woo as it struggled to the bitter end, but the battle had already been decided by then. Stab. Stab. The poison fang of Kasaka now traveled lower down from the neck and stabbed the Cerberus' chest. Soon enough, the monster's resistance became noticeably weaker and weaker. In the end, the heads of the Cerberus fell to the side, lifeless. Tearing. You have defeated Hell's Gatekeeper, Cerberus. Level up. In one breath, his level rose up by 4. That was how difficult this battle was. Jin-Woo only let go of the Cerberus' neck after confirming its body going limp with his own eyes. The heavy body sprawled to the floor without any resistance whatsoever. Jin-Woo rested his hands on his knees. Only now could he breathe a sigh of relief. A monster that could use a skill if he didn't prepare a hidden trump card, then he'd have been killed for sure. A chill crawled down his spine just from thinking about it. Oh, I almost forgot. Items. Would there be as many rewards befitting his life or death struggle to bring down this monster? After calming himself down, Jin-Woo reached out towards the Cerberus. You have discovered item, Gatekeeper's Necklace. Take it. You have discovered item, Key to the Castle's Gate. Take it. You have discovered item, Cerberus Molar, X3. Take it. Take them all. A steel necklace originally found around one of the Cerberus necks, a gray key, and 3 molars of a monster appeared in his hand. Item, Gatekeeper's Necklace. Rarity, A. Type, Necklace. Agility plus 20, Perception plus 20. Item, Key to the Castle's Gate. Type, Key. The key to unlock the gates of the demon's castle. Can only be acquired after killing the gatekeeper. Item, Cerberus Molar. Rarity, None. Type, Miscellaneous. Jin-Woo stared up at the burning tower. The very top of the structure was completely shrouded in some kind of blurry fog. He had to actually enter the tower if he wanted to see what was going on inside. But, Jin-Woo shook his head. Now is not the time. He only barely managed to hunt down a single sentry standing guard by the door, even with his title buffing him up and resorting to using up the quest reward, too. He couldn't even guess just what kind of danger would be waiting for him beyond that gate. So, now was the time for him to back off. Still, he was certain of one thing. Just as the explanation said, this key to the demon's castle was indeed something he wanted. The name Blessed Random Box wasn't wrong. Leveling up quickly, valuable items, and plenty of gold, too. This place had it all. And one day, he'd get to claim them all as his. Only that, today wasn't that day. Although he was slightly unwilling, he stored the gray key inside his inventory. He'll return. Definitely, very soon. Jin-Woo smiled as he turned around to leave. A few days went by without any incident. He asked around association called him regarding a raid and protagonist quickly gotten ready and headed out to meet the raid party. As soon as he stepped in. Pardon me, young man. I see that you're feeling much better now. A rather friendly voice came from behind him and Jin-Woo turned around to look who it was. A hunter he actually knew, too. Mr. Song Ajusi? Jin-Woo's expression brightened in an instant. Mr. Song Chi-yeol looked at Sung Jin-Woo with an expression half in disbelief and the other half in delight. I did hear the news that you were fine, but I still can't believe it, even after running into you like this. Song Chi-yeol formed a deeply moved expression next. Jin-Woo felt kind of embarrassed by the emotional eyes of Song Chi-yeol and sheepishly scratched the side of his temple. Meanwhile, Song Chi-yeol continued on. I should have gone to visit you at the hospital, but for some reason, the folks at the association all tightly shut their mouths and I couldn't hear any concrete information on you until now. Did you know that Miss Ju-hui is also anxiously waiting for your news? Miss Ju-hui? Really? That's right. She said that she'd give up being a hunter, but still, she stopped by at last week's raid location just to look for you. Last week? After listening to Mr. Song's story, it turned out that, rather coincidentally, there was a raid organized by the association on the very same day he entered Instant Dungeons. That was why there hadn't been any word from the association until now. It was not that there hadn't been any calls from the association, but more like he missed it when it did come. A small mystery got resolved pretty easily, just like that. Song Chi-yeol studied Sung Jin-Woo's appearance here and there, still mystified by what he was seeing. By the way, was Mr. Song this tall before? And, with his bad leg and all, too. Song Chi-yeol's gaze naturally headed lower. And then, his eyes grew extra wide in shock. Your leg? Jin-Woo calmly made his reply. When I came to, my leg had been all healed up. Even I'm not sure what happened to me. Song Chi-yeol nodded his head. Ever since Gates appeared for the first time 10 years ago, many illogical things continued to transpire to this day. The people called hunters who had awakened their abilities were a prime example of this. A healer ranked S could reputedly heal a person who was ripped to shreds back to normal, as long as the victim was still alive. What if a high-ranking healer healed Jin-Woo's injuries while he was unconscious? If that was the case, then his severed leg being reattached didn't even qualify as a miracle. It'd do no good to see a young man such as yourself become disabled like that. What a relief this is. What a relief. Song Chi-yeol lightly patted his chest as if a big weight of his had been lifted off his shoulders now. It was then, Jin-Woo's gaze drifted toward Song Chi-yeol's left arm. The older man's sleeve was empty. Song Chi-yeol chuckled and massaged his left shoulder. Don't you worry about it. A hunter getting injured during a raid is a normal occurrence, after all. No, I've been lucky for not running into an accident until then. The two men arrived at the meeting place. The gate had formed in the middle of the road pretty close to residential areas, so the police officers called in to control the access to the location. However, there were almost no onlookers present here, to begin with. The majority of gates the association took on were those dangerous ones that had been left alone for too long after their initial discovery. Besides, even if one were to stick around a gate, one would still not get to see how hunters fought, anyway. It was only a couple of curious, naughty kids loitering around who got chased away by the officers every now and then. With a thud, the door to the taxi was closed shut. Jin-Woo and Song Ji-yeol had exited from the taxi and made their way towards the location where the other hunters had been gathered. There were other hunters who had arrived earlier who were standing near the gate. Well, there were only 2 other hunters there, however. The number of those willing to come had decreased sharply after that huge incident. Jin-Woo heard from Song Ji-yeol on their way here that, besides those who died, many other hunters decided to quit this life from the shock of that underground temple incident. One of them happens to be Miss Ju-hui. Jin-Woo took a look around, but he couldn't see her. When Jin-Woo and Song Ji-yeol approached closer, the 2 hunters awkwardly averted their gazes. Jin-Woo narrowed his eyes. But, of course. These 2 happened to be Kim Sang-sik, who ran off trying to save only himself, and the other male hunter who had discarded the injured Jin-Woo. Of course, they would find it rather awkward to face him. Excuse me, Mr. Song. Kim Sang-sik was thinking of at least greeting the youth, but when he was subjected to Jin-Woo's cold glare, he eventually shifted his gaze away. Kim Sang-sik shut his mouth, studied the mood for a bit, before shuffling further away from there. He stopped at a bit of distance away and sneaked a glance at Jin-Woo, before he tilted his head in confusion. Is he really the Song Jin-Woo that I know? I mean, his eyes are as fierce as a monster, man. Like a real monster. Kim Sang-sik shuddered deeply. As he thought, his arm was covered in goosebumps. Jin-Woo withdrew his glare filled with hostilities. Thankfully, quite unlike you Jin-ho, Kim Sang-sik was quick on the uptake. After locking eyes once, he didn't even try to come near Jin-Woo's vicinity. He sincerely hoped that this arrangement would remain for the rest of the raid. Mr. Song. Song Ji-yeol, standing next to Jin-Woo, shifted his gaze in a direction and smiled gently. There she is. Jin-Woo also turned his head in the direction Song Ji-yeol was looking at. But, before he had the chance to completely turn around to look, Mr. Jin-Woo. Something rather soft suddenly hugged him tightly. Miss Ju-hui? While Jin-Woo was getting flustered, Ju-hui was too busy making sure he was fine with a tearful face. Are you alright? You are not hurt anywhere, right? Your leg? Mr. Jin-Woo, how come your leg is? Ju-hui's eyes went extra round as she alternated her gaze between his face and his leg. There was a bit of difference in how extreme it was, but nevertheless, her reaction was more or less the same with Song Ji-yeol's. Oh, that. Just as Jin-Woo was about to reply. How steamy, eh? It's steamy, I say. Both the gazes of Jin-Woo and Ju-hui shifted over in the direction of that voice. From afar, an unknown man was whistling loudly at them. More importantly, though, he was wearing the orange-colored prison overall. Is there a film shoot going on around nearby or something? While Jin-Woo was tilting his head in confusion, a man wearing a business suit climbed down from the front seat of a certain minivan. He then threw out a measured warning at the prison overall guy. Shut your mouth. The prison overall guy pretended to not know anything by staring at the distance. However, he quickly threw an oily wink at Ju-hui when the business suit looked back inside the van. Immediately, Jin-Woo's expression crumpled. 2 more people climbed out of the van right away. Both of them were men. And particularly worthy of note was the fact that they all wore prison overalls and had been cuffed as well. The business suit led the 3 prison overalls towards the association's employee. And she welcomed him with a bright expression. You've finally arrived. Please forgive us for our tardiness. There was traffic on the road. The business suit then proceeded to sign on each of the documents the association employee presented to him. In the meantime, the employee called for the hunters to gather around. These folks are the replacement convicts who will participate in the raid alongside you, hunters. And so, the expressions of the hunters hardened considerably. Kim Sang-sik was the first to step forward. What? Replacement convicts? Are you telling us to go on a raid along with a bunch of criminals? Hunters who had committed crimes had 2 choices. Either spend their allotted time behind the bars, or cooperate with the association and reduce their sentences. Most chose the latter option, and they were referred to as the replacement convicts. The association employee repeatedly lowered her head. I'm really sorry about this. It's only because the number of hunters active in our district has declined so much that the association has no choice but to do this. However, they will be accompanied by a hunter from the monitoring division, so you don't have to worry too much. Kim Sang-sik asked, still full of suspicion. A hunter from the monitoring division, you say? Yes. All the convicts are rank CS, but the hunter from the monitoring division is actually a rank B, so there is nothing for you to worry about. Kim Sang-sik nodded his head. The popular opinion stated that you'd need around 10 C-rank hunters in order to contend against a single hunter ranked B. Well, a B rank was personally coming to monitor the troublemakers, not to mention participating in the raid itself, so there was no reason to say no here. 1 rank B and 3 rank CS, huh? Jin-Woo quietly studied the faces of the monitoring division's agent as well as the 3 replacement convicts, before tilting his head slightly. Something's off here. He could sense a minute trace of murderous intent flowing between those 4. Was this also one of the facets of the enhanced perception stat? Or was he simply being overly cautious? In any case, he was overcome with this unexplainable anxiety all of a sudden. So, Jin-Woo whispered in Ju-Hui's ear. Miss Ju-Hui, please don't participate in this raid. Ju-Hui looked up at Jin-Woo's eyes and asked back. What about you, Mr. Jin-Woo? Rather than answering her, he too asked back. If I say I'll be going? Well, in that case, I'm going too. She looked like she'd follow him, no matter what. I'm sure she's only doing this because she's concerned about me. And, he learned through prior experience that, whenever Ju-Hui's face was forming that expression, she'd suddenly become a very stubborn young lady and she'd never change her mind, no matter what. There shouldn't be a problem with me around, right? After all, he had experience dealing with Hwang Dong-suk's gang, which contained 5 rank CS in their midst. Jin-Woo nodded his head. In that case, okay. The agent from the monitoring division finished signing on all of the documents, and then came to speak to the gathered hunters. My name is Kang Tae-sik from the monitoring division. I believe you've been informed of the situation. You'll keep a very close eye on those 3, so you can rest easy. Kang Tae-sik then beckoned the 3 convicts to come closer. They all trudged towards him and presented their hands. With a practiced hand of his own, Kang Tae-sik swiftly undid their cuffs. Wowzers. I thought I was going to die from the stuffiness just now. We aren't even slaves, so isn't it against our rights for you to drag us around here and there like this? The convicts massaged their freed wrists and continued to pile on their complaints. Kang Tae-sik roundly ignored them and returned his gaze back to the hunters. Who will be taking the lead today? Song Chi-yeol, having led raids before, raised his hand about halfway up. Kang Tae-sik nodded his head. Understood. With Song Chi-yeol in the lead, hunters entered the gate one by one. Let's get going as well. Jin-Woo and Ju-Hui also entered the gate, albeit at the same time. Perhaps the trauma from the last incident remained with her, because she ever so slightly held onto Jin-Woo's sleeve. Goblins were the main enemies for this dungeon. They were the weakest of all man-type monsters out there. So, clearing the dungeon itself wasn't hard at all. These strange-looking creatures were weak enough for Jin-Woo to fight evenly one-on-one even before he got his power boost. Still, Jin-Woo did his utmost best to carefully hunt goblins with his bare hands. When Jin-Woo displayed the combat prowess that easily exceeded their imaginations, both Ju-Hui and Song Chi-yeol's eyes became extra round in surprise. Wow! He was hiding most of his true power, yet the result of each fight was still remarkably different compared to the past. Ju-Hui approached him and carefully asked him, "Have you been working out lately?" "Well I've been jogging every day." "Jogging?" Ju-Hui tilted her head, but well, he wasn't technically lying here, so. But besides all that, I'm not earning any experience points here. The enemy's level is too low, and your experience points did not rise. Jin-Woo formed a disappointed expression. The message of goblins being too weak and him not getting any experience points kept repeating itself. This isn't going to work. On top of this, the magic crystals from the goblins were also the worst grade there could be. Jin-Woo took a look around him. The C-ranked convicts must have been really excited by the taste of freedom because they were wildly swinging their weapons and energetically ripped goblins to shreds. From that scene alone, it was difficult to tell apart just who were the monsters and who were the humans there. I guess there's no reason for me to break a sweat today. Well, he wasn't earning any experience points, nor was he making lots of money today, either. A certain thought popped up in his head next. If it's going to be like this from now on, wouldn't it be better to quit the association? Pretty much the majority of jobs coming to the association's way were clearing the gates ranked D and E. However, if his level wasn't going to increase from entering those types of gates, then there was no need to participate in association's raids anymore. I can easily earn mom's hospital fees by myself now, too. He could quit the association at any time he felt like it. This was why having money was always for the better. As soon as he had some, his selection had widened. While thinking of this and that, the raid team entered deeper into the dungeon. And soon, a forked road with 3 paths appeared before them. Kang Tae-sik made a suggestion to Song Chi-yeol. Since the difficulty of the dungeon is low, how about splitting up from here onwards? Yes, let's do that. Song Chi-yeol readily agreed to that idea. Jin-Woo closed his eyes and extended his perception to the max. Now, which path leads to the boss? He was hoping that maybe the boss would give him a few experience points, at the very least. Soon enough, he could pick up on the auras of all living creatures inside the dungeon. Jin-Woo opened his eyes and spoke to Song Chi-yeol. Ajusi, let's go left. Okay. Jin-Woo, Song Chi-yeol, and Ju-hui chose the left pathway, Kang Tae-sik and the three convicts the right one, and the remaining two went down the middle one. Jin-Woo's heart began beating a little bit faster. The boss is at the end of this passage. Although it couldn't be described as strong, a unique and different aura from that of a goblin was leaking out from the end of this cavern-like passageway. He wanted to quickly kill the boss. Out of the blue, screams reverberated throughout the dungeon from somewhere, one after the other. Those weren't from the goblins. No, they definitely belonged to humans. Jin-Woo, Song Chi-yeol, and Lee Ju-hui exchanged glances. They thought the things had calmed down, only for yet another desperate scream to enter their ears. Song Chi-yeol's expression hardened. Let's go take a look. The three of them quickly ran to where the screams came from. Jin-Woo could have run faster than his two companions, but for the sake of their safety, matched their speeds. Just how long did they have to run? Ju-hui cried out in alarm after finding a person. There's a person there. And it just so happened to be the hunter from the monitoring division, Kang Tae-sik. He was kneeling on the ground, covered completely in blood. Kang Tae-sik shouted out at them. Be careful. I don't know where they could be right now. Kang Tae-sik spat those words out with great difficulty before collapsing on the ground in pain. Ju-hui couldn't watch on anymore and hurriedly ran towards Kang Tae-sik. Hold on, I'll heal you right now. Ju-hui was thinking like this, regardless of where the enemies were hiding, she was still a healer ranked B, meaning the speed of her healing magic was very fast. So, she thought that before enemies attacked them, it'd be more advantageous for her to quickly heal Kang Tae-sik. Please hold on for a little while longer. Ju-hui stood in front of Kang Tae-sik and reached out with both of her hands. Gentle rays of light gathered near the ends of her hands. It happened then. Kang Tae-sik rapidly raised his upper body up and took aim at the center of Ju-hui's neck with his hand full of magical energy. Swish! Just before his fingertip could touch Ju-hui's Adam's apple, someone managed to grab Kang Tae-sik's wrist just in time. Snap! The stunned Ju-hui stumbled backwards before falling on her rear. Plop! Kang Tae-sik's expression became one of shocked amazement. He stopped my attack in that short space of time? It was not a hard job for a high-ranked hunter to deal with a handful of lower-ranked hunters. The only thorn in his side today happened to a female hunter ranked B, the same rank as he was. The silver lining about this thorn was that she was not a combat-related hunter. She didn't possess any abilities to protect herself, so as long as he succeeded in sneak attacking her, everything would end quite easily. However, to think, his sneak attack would end up missing. With things like this, there was no reward for all that great acting he had put on. Kang Tae-sik's gaze followed the hand grabbing his wrist and to its owner. And Jin-Woo's face was at the end. Jin-Woo's eyes were emitting a very strong light of murderous intent. Kang Tae-sik frowned deeply. How dare you, a fucking association bottom feeder. Swish! Kang Tae-sik's other fist flew towards Jin-Woo's face. However, Jin-Woo simply tilted his head out of the way and let the fist fly by. What? Kang Tae-sik hurriedly yanked his arm loose from Jin-Woo's grasp. Huh? Jin-Woo displayed his shock next. As expected from a high-ranked hunter and his power. Now that both of his hands were freed, Kang Tae-sik began pouring out attacks without a rest. However, Jin-Woo also moved at the speed that didn't lose out to Kang Tae-sik's and went on the offensive of his own, too. Fists and arms belonging to men endlessly collided and traded countless blows. None of them showed any signs of backing off. Seizing this opportunity, Song Chi-yeol quickly dragged Ju-hui away from the area. Ah, juicy. Ju-hui couldn't finish what she wanted to say because of the sheer shock from seeing what was happening right now. However, there was one person here who was even more shocked than Ju-hui, and that was none other than Song Chi-yeol. Just how on earth is this possible? This fierce battle unfolding at a scarcely believable speed he was having a hard time trying to follow with his eyes. Something like that was expected of a high-ranked hunter, so that was fine, but then, the Sung Jin-Woo fighting that man couldn't have been the same person from Song Chi-yeol's memories. The youth was definitely not losing out against a rank B hunter at all. I'm a C rank, and even I can't follow his movements with my eyes. Indeed, his gut feeling proved to be right. The Jin-Woo in front of his eyes right now was not the same youth from his memories, an E rank who was weak but possessing a good head on his shoulders. In the blink of an eye, the two traded hundreds of blows and they quickly stepped back while trying to catch their breaths. Jin-Woo glared at Kang Tae-sik and frowned. The blood on your clothes, I'm guessing it's not yours. Kang Tae-sik loosened his wrist and answered back. That's right, it belongs to those bastards. Besides all that, I never expected to run into a hunter of your caliber in this shitty place. Honestly speaking, Kang Tae-sik was really impressed. He hadn't heard of any information regarding a high-ranking hunter slumming it out along with those bottom feeders working for the association. This is going to cost me big time. He thought that today would be the best time to act, so he did his deeds, but quite unexpectedly, he ran into a pretty steep hurdle here. Kang Tae-sik couldn't control his curiosity and asked out aloud. Who the hell are you? What rank are you? Jin-Woo, grasping poison fang of Kasaka tightly in his hand, replied rather curtly. Sung Jin-Woo. I'm rank E. Kang Tae-sik felt like someone had hit him in the back of his head. A bastard that displayed the movement equal to his own speed, which was unmatched within the rank B, introduced himself as a measly rank E just now. Is he trying to make fun of me? Kang Tae-sik gnashed his teeth. No, hang on. Indeed, there was something odd here. If he's really a high-rank hunter, there is no reason for him to be here, isn't it? The jobs these bottom feeder association hunters did were quite obvious. Their main role was to clear those gates that guilds and freelancers gave up on because of their low monetary values. Their earnings were pathetically small compared to other hunters, and they were not widely acknowledged by other hunters either. In other words, there was a very good chance that this bastard really was an E rank. Only that, his abilities were anything but. Still, a fake registrant wouldn't brazenly work under the association like this, so Kang Tae-sik eventually arrived at the only logical conclusion. He is a reawakened. When he thought about it, he remembered the upper echelons of the association getting a bit noisier with a rumor of someone going through a reawakening somewhere nearby this location. And that person was supposedly a hunter affiliated with the association. He should have memorized that name back then. As that matter happened only a couple of weeks ago, if this bastard had been delaying getting a reassignment test for some reason until now, it was very much possible for him to remain as an E rank and assist the association with their work. Who could have guessed that such a guy would show up today? Kang Tae-sik had made sure to perform thorough background checks on the hunters participating in today's raid, but he had missed the existence of this one. I really have terrible luck, don't I? That's the only conclusion he could arrive at. I should have asked for more money, if things turned out this way. Kang Tae-sik recalled the events of a few days ago while licking his dried lips. A few days ago. A cafe near the headquarters of the association. Kang Tae-sik asked the moment he settled down in his seat. What business do you have with me? The middle-aged man sitting his opposite side seemed rather haggard for some reason. He said that he's an owner of some company, didn't he? Kang Tae-sik definitely did not know who this man was. However, he still decided to free up some time after this man continued to call him on the phone, sounding quite desperate and all. The middle-aged man muttered as if he was speaking to himself. I've heard that no one knows what happens exactly inside dungeons. The man's voice was so soft that Kang Tae-sik had to ask again. What did you say? This is every cent I have in my name. The man suddenly presented his bank account book. Kang Tae-sik alternated his gaze between the book and the man's face, before confirming the bank balance printed on the book's pages. There was a substantial amount of 2 billion printed there. And why are you showing me this? When Kang Tae-sik formed a questioning expression, the middle-aged man's head dropped lower. Among the criminals you're in charge of, there is one who had hurt my little girl. Because of that, she took her own life, and my wife is still in the hospital from the shock. The middle-aged man's voice became tearful. Yet, such a bastard will be able to roam the streets again in a few years' time. You think he'll be able to rest easy knowing that? The man raised his sorrow and rage-filled face. I'm sure you can already tell what I'm implying here. The man lowered his head again. I beg of you, Hunter Nim. A deafening silence descended between these two men. Kang Tae-sik leaned against the back of his chair and fell into a deep contemplation. Only after a long while passed by did he open his mouth again. Can you guess why I chose to work for the association's monitoring division? Pardon me? The middle-aged man raised his head. Kang Tae-sik explained himself. As a B-rank hunter, I'm considered as one of the higher-ranked hunters. Large guilds continue to send their scouting offers in my direction all the time. Yet, can you guess why I persist in doing this job while getting a pittance in return? I don't know. The corners of Kang Tae-sik's lips arched up. You see, I find it more enjoyable to fight against people rather than monsters. In that sense, the monitoring division was like the heaven-sent job for Kang Tae-sik. Well, he could beat up other hunters in the name of the law, after all. And he'd end up killing one or two due to unavoidable circumstances, too. Due to unavoidable circumstances. Kang Tae-sik inwardly smiled and spoke. Stepping on that insect you told me about isn't going to be difficult at all. However, there will be other hunters inside the dungeon besides the insect, as well. I might view that bastard as an insect, but will other hunters think that way, I wonder? The middle-aged man formed a disappointed expression after hearing Kang Tae-sik's rather pessimistic-sounding words. And here he was, thinking that he'd finally get to avenge the death of his little girl. It felt like the heavens were crashing down on top of him. However, Kang Tae-sik formed a sinister smile as if to mock the other man. This money, plus 1 billion won on top of that, to deal with the other hunters as well. Can you do it? However, if a reawakened hunter was among those other hunters, then the amount of 3 billion won was not quite enough. Well, his own life was on the line, after all. The self-proclaimed ranky hunter was still emitting a sharp, observant air even now. He looked as if he'd seize any slight opening there was. Kang Tae-sik swallowed his saliva. I can't take him lightly. Kang Tae-sik was confident of winning here. He had never lost a single one-on-one fight even before he underwent the awakening process. However, even though he could win, it would not be an easy victory at all. Right now, he had to revise his plans ever so slightly. With a nice timing, the ranky hunters asked a question. Those convicts, why did you kill them? The father of a girl who was raped by those bastards came to ask me for the favor. Those bastards were animals worthy of getting killed. And I simply took care of animals that hurt other people, that was all. The ranky hunter was listening without saying anything. It seemed quite likely that talking might work here. Kang Tae-sik went straight to persuading the other man. Although the matter had come down to this, I don't wish to hurt you. How about ignoring today's matter altogether? As long as we make this deal here, I promise I won't try anything to you and your group. Of course, he couldn't let a potential source of trouble fester. That was why Kang Tae-sik was thinking. There was a chance that a head-on fight would result in him getting badly injured, so he'd get out of here first, wait for an opportune moment, and dispose of all the witnesses one at the time. However, the ranky hunter snorted derisively. You should have said those things before you tried your little tricks. You want us to ignore everything just because you failed your sneak attack? That man didn't say anything wrong there. Kang Tae-sik smirked in dumbfounded. In the end, you want to have a go, is that it? Well, in that case, he'd have to go all out, then. The light shimmering in Kang Tae-sik's eyes became colder. His sharp glare quickly swept across the ranky hunter top to bottom. And his forehead creased up for a second. Where did he get his dagger from? Since before he had noticed it, the E-rank hunter was holding a dagger. Well, it shouldn't be too important, is it? It didn't matter where that weapon came from, indeed. What's important here, though, was the type of the weapon. Kang Tae-sik quickly concluded his assessment. The class that used daggers and utilized quick movements, his opponent was a super close type damage dealer. Most likely, his speciality was assassination. What a coincidence that their specialties happened to be the same. However, this guy only underwent his reawakening not too long ago. The difference in experience should be absolutely massive. He might not even be able to properly utilize the skills at his disposal. Let me teach you a thing or two as your senior. Kang Tae-sik extracted a knife from his hips and smirked derisively at the ranky hunter. Can you do something like this? And then, Kang Tae-sik activated his stealth skill, thereby disappearing from the spot. That caused the ranky hunter to get flustered and he hurriedly looked around his vicinity. Kang Tae-sik could see his naked panic and confusion quite clearly. But, that's so obvious. The stealth skill didn't only make one's body go transparent. The body, the sound, and even the smell. The skill that cloaked everything about the person activating it. That was the stealth skill in a nutshell. There were only a handful of assassin-type hunters who could use this skill in the entire world. Utterly unrelated to one's ranks, you just had to be a lucky few who unlocked this skill when going through the awakening process. Let's end this in one hit. Kang Tae-sik swiftly moved to the rear of the E-rank hunter. His back was wide open, unguarded. This is the end. He was expecting to engage in a bitter battle, but it turned out to be a rather simple fight in the end. If the opponent was getting ready to counter the stealth skill, then it'd not be this easy at all. As expected, the difference in experience decided the victor today. Die. Kang Tae-sik's knife aimed at the spot just below the E-rank hunter's ribs and powerfully stabbed forward. However, clang! Two daggers collided in the air and sparks flew off. With his stealth skill deactivated, one could now see Kang Tae-sik's wide-open eyes. What? But how? The E-rank hunter's dagger had accurately blocked off his own dagger. Unable to hide his shock, Kang Tae-sik raised his eyes and looked up at the E-rank hunter's face. And that hunter opened his mouth with a totally unimpressed face. Oh, so now you decide to pop up. Well, what did you say? Unable to understand the words of this ranky hunter, Kang Tae-sik suddenly felt this inexplicable fear in his heart. Tearing. Emergency quest, kill all the enemies. There are life forms holding murderous intentions towards the player. Kill them all in order to secure your own safety. If you do not follow this instruction, a corresponding penalty will be given. The number of enemies left to kill, 1. The number of killed enemies, 0. Jin-Woo confirmed the emergency quest message and breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't a waste of time. He was kind of worried that if Kang Tae-sik didn't take the initiative, Jin-Woo wouldn't receive the emergency quest notification. It was quite unlike how it was with Hwang Dong-suk and his gang back then. That was why he tested the system out, and it was as he expected. The moment Kang Tae-sik revealed his murderous intent, the message popped up. He wasn't just mindlessly chatting with the guy, or revealing his panic, or showing off openings for nothing until now. I really didn't know he could use stealth, though. Actually, when Kang Tae-sik did disappear in front of his eyes, Jin-Woo was slightly taken aback. Well, stealth was a pretty rare skill, after all. But, when he concentrated a bit harder, he easily and accurately sensed Kang Tae-sik's every movement. So much so that he could close his eyes and still find his target with no problem. This was the effect of his enhanced perception stat. He continued to invest on this stat just so he could tell whether he should fight or flight, but today, he learned of a new use for it. I got lucky. Thanks to that, Kang Tae-sik was getting shocked out of his mind as if he had seen the ghosts of his ancestors. But, how? And now, when Jin-Woo takes care of this murdering bastard, he'd be able to enjoy the quest's delicious rewards. If I'm going to fight anyway, then I might as well get everything I'm supposed to, no? It was his turn now. From now on, he'd start attacking for real. The two daggers locked in a deadly embrace continued to push against each other. It seemed that their strength was about the same. It was here when Jin-Woo's eyes gleamed dangerously. In that case, should I find an opening somewhere else? Jin-Woo's leg moved in an instant, and he stomped on Kang Tae-sik's foot. Jin-Woo didn't miss this opportunity. Skill, dash has been activated. Your movement speed has increased by 30%. 1 mana will be spent every minute during its activation. Jin-Woo rapidly got closer to his target. Kang Tae-sik's eyes grew wider still. He got faster? Jin-Woo had been displaying an already high level of agile movements, but now that he had gotten even faster, Kang Tae-sik found it quite disorientating. Jin-Woo closed the distance in the blink of an eye and sank his poison fang of Kasaka down on Kang Tae-sik's thigh. He aimed there precisely because Kang Tae-sik was focused on defending his upper body only. Effect, paralysis has been activated. The effect has been cancelled due to the high resistance of the target. Effect, bleeding has been activated. The target's stamina will decrease by 1% per second. Nice. The added effects of the Kasaka dagger kicked in as well. It was a bit regretful that the paralysis didn't work, but still, this fight had become just a tad easier now. However, Kang Tae-sik was a high-ranked hunter himself. So, his resistance was nothing to scoff about. His dagger aimed at Jin-Woo's vitals and continued to fly in. Swish, swish. Jin-Woo evaded the blade with only a hair's breadth and also attacked Kang Tae-sik's vital spots. Even though his thigh was badly damaged, Kang Tae-sik calmly defended against Jin-Woo's attacks, as befitting an experienced hunter. Clang! Cling! Cold sweat drops formed on the foreheads of both men. Our speeds are about the same. We're moving at the same speed. Two men were inwardly admiring each other's agile movements and continued to clash in a dazzling display of super close proximity knife fighting. Several powerful attacks, each one capable of ending this fight if hit, were exchanged without rest. It was a truly scary and gripping battle that caused the onlookers' blood to go cold. I got to break this stalemate somehow. Jin-Woo gathered strength in his eyes. Skill, intimidation has been activated. The moment his eyes met Jin-Woo's, Kang Tae-sik flinched slightly for some reason. What was that? Effect, fear has been activated. The target's, all, stats will decrease by 50% for 1 minute. It worked. Jin-Woo knew that he had won now. On the other hand, a small earthquake erupted in Kang Tae-sik's eyes. How come my body is? After he had met Jin-Woo's gaze, his body felt as heavy as if he was floundering in deep water or some such. His trusty speed began decreasing as well. Wounds on Kang Tae-sik's body increased quickly one by one. This isn't possible. Kang Tae-sik's thoughts became confused and messy. This was, without a doubt, a depuffing effect. But, he had never, ever heard of a case where an assassin class was able to use a debuff magic. Assassination was not his speciality, then? If that was the case, then what was up with his crazy speed? However, Kang Tae-sik had stopped his train of thoughts there. His confusion had rapidly morphed into panic, instead. Because he had spotted Jin-Woo abruptly rushing in closer. Kang Tae-sik hurriedly took aim at Jin-Woo's eyes. Swish! Jin-Woo quickly tilted his head out of the way, but the dagger still managed to graze his cheek. Of course, he knew he'd get hurt, at least by this much, or even worse. In order to get that decisive strike in, he decided to take the risk. Kang Tae-sik's expression crumpled. Fuck. Jin-Woo succeeded in getting close to Kang Tae-sik's chest and stabbed down on the latter with the poison fang of Kasaka. Kang Tae-sik's eyes shot open wider. Both men knew right away at that moment. The victor had been truly decided with that one move. Crimson-red blood pooled in Kang Tae-sik's mouth. It was gushing up from his chest. As blood leaked out from the side of his lips, Kang Tae-sik formed a smirk. To actually run into a reawakened hunter inside a lowly rank D dungeon. Me and my seriously rotten. The dagger in Kang Tae-sik's hand fell to the floor. He continued to pant heavily as he leaned his head closer and whispered something in Jin-Woo's ear. Jin-Woo silently listened to those last words, before pulling the dagger out from Kang Tae-sik's chest. Just like a dress slipping off a clothes hanger, Kang Tae-sik crumpled to the floor, lifeless. Plop. T-ring. You have completed emergency quest, kill all the enemies. The expected messages did pop up, but Jin-Woo's expression wasn't so good. Just like the last time, the aftertaste of killing someone remained bitter and nothing to feel too happy about. Even though the other guy attacked first and initiated this fight. Completion rewards are now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Y/N. If there were no rewards, then this would be one hell of a loss-loss situation, that. Jin-Woo consoled himself with that line of thought and confirmed the rewards. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. 5 additional stat points. Huh? Jin-Woo formed a confused expression. The reward on offer was far less than when compared to fighting Hwang Dong-suk and his goons. But, it was a far harder opponent this time, though? Did this mean the number of enemies was more important than the skills of the opponent? Or, was there something else he hadn't figured out yet? Jin-Woo tilted his head slightly. It was here that Jin-Woo lowered his gaze and ended up spotting something rather odd. There was a spot of flickering light about as big as a coin gleaming on the corpse of Kang Tae-sik. Jin-Woo's eyes grew wider and wider. No way, could it be? Although he could hardly believe it, that light seemed far too similar to the one emitted by the loot found on the dead monsters from the instant dungeons. That light also indicated the position of the magic crystal inside a monster from the gates. But now, the dead Kang Tae-sik was emitting this light. What does this mean? Jin-Woo calmed his trembling heart and quietly reached out towards the chest area of Kang Tae-sik where that flickering light was coming from. T-ring. Indeed, he wasn't seeing things just now. You've discovered rune stone, stealth. Take it? A rune stone? Are you talking about that rune stone? His heart began pounding even harder than before. The skill Kang Tae-sik used had now become a rune stone and was waiting to be discovered on his body. Stealth was a rare skill that only a select few hunters could use. If this message was indeed talking about the rune stones he knew, then acquire it. Suddenly, a small rock with mysterious runic letters carved on the surface appeared in his hand. Rune stone, stealth. You can absorb the skill by breaking this rune stone. Absorbing skills by breaking the stone. As the description said, this rock was definitely a rune stone. By breaking it, he'd be able to use stealth from now on. It was then, he heard the voices of 2 people coming from his rear. Mr. Sung, are you alright? Mr. Sung Jin-Woo. Protagonist hid the rune stone inside his pocket and turned around. And he found Song Chi-yeol and Lee Ju-hui busy gawking at him with eyes filled with disbelief. The rank E hunter protagonist, who used to struggle like there's no tomorrow in a rank D dungeon, just defeated a rank B hunter Kang Tae-sik. Protagonist, of course, knew what Song Chi-yeol and Ju-hui wanted to say here. That was why he opened his mouth first. I'm really sorry. When the right time comes, I'll tell you both everything, so please, don't ask me anything for the time being. When protagonist made a request in a grave voice, Ju-hui nodded her head first. Eventually, Song Chi-yeol nodded, as well. If you're saying that, then you must have your reasons. I understand, young man. Protagonist then turned his head in the direction where the boss was. Although the situation had become complicated somewhat, his plan of killing the boss hadn't changed. He wanted to kill the boss by himself if possible. Also, there was another thing he had to, meaning these 2 couldn't be here. Protagonist looked back at Song Chi-yeol. With what has happened here, I think it's impossible to continue on with this raid anymore. For the time being, you 2 should leave the dungeon and contact the association. I'll remain here and search for other survivors. Song Chi-yeol instantly realized what protagonist was trying to do. He's going to close the gate all by himself. Even from the older man's perspective, doing that would ensure the least amount of suspicion. That would be a good idea. Miss Ju-hui, let's go ahead first. Ju-hui hesitated after hearing Song Chi-yeol's recommendation, but then, she took a step back without saying anything else. Even as she was escaping from the dungeon, she continued to look behind her several times. Protagonist only let out a sigh once the shadows of the two people were gone for good. The dungeon that emitted magical energy waves equaling a rank D only had a bunch of rank E goblins inside. In that case, there was a good chance that the magical energy wave was actually coming solely from the boss. A boss like that should give him enough experience points for a level up. But before I do that, there was something else he had better confirm first. Protagonist pushed his perception to the limit and carefully combed over all auras present within the dungeon. Found you. Protagonist began waking to his new destination. On the way, he discovered the cold corpses of Kim Sang-sik and the other hunter. This was the power of a high-ranked hunter. If such a hunter really wanted to, then killing a few lower-ranked hunters could be done in the blink of an eye. Jin-Woo's expression hardened as he walked past them.
We will finish this chapter here. Next chapter will be out soon, so stay tuned.